Adask, how are you
I'm
doing,
the
brother?
last one to know.
So good to hear from you again. How you been?
I can't complain.
I hear that. Uh, you know, uh,
I don't have a camera that works on this thing. So
well, last time we spoke, you spoke some wise words about only Saint Peter knows when you get to the pearly gates how how
yeah,
you.
I know it's all speculation up until then. How you doing? I don't know. I think I'm on the bubble. Is what I think. It could go good. Could go bad. We'll just have to watch and see.
Absolutely. So what you been up to?
Well, they shut my blog off.
Ah,
WordPress.
somebody was asking about that. Tell us about it. What's going on?
Well, I don't know. They haven't exactly told me. They've posted a message that it's been blocked off and the rest of this thing. It's been suspended or terminated. And they haven't identified which one they're doing, if they suspended or terminated. But I think it's terminated because it's been off for probably about 8 months. All right, so that sounds more like a termination than a suspension.
Hmm.
But they've got a term of service drawn up there that's pretty one-sided. It's heads they win and tails I lose, no matter what you do on this thing. But I've paid a little attention. I've seen a few things, and I think there's leverage to be had on this, and I intend to sue the SOBs. Although it may be another 4 or 5 months before I get to it,
Hmm.
just because of the research involved. I've been researching this thing. It's been off for probably about 8 months now, and I've been researching the whole time. And I've gone off on 100 different rabbit trails, and some of them are valuable. I mean, I've done
Absolutely.
some research that impresses me. I mean, I was like, oh my God, it really does impress me. But I've got so much of it. It's like, what am I going to do with it? It's like having a wheelbarrow of information that you'd like to use, but you only got space for one folder.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'll
and
finish the
sometimes all this
research and then
research.
starts. Go ahead.
Sometimes sometimes, and I agree with you. Sometimes you just collect so much information. Uh, Someone like yourself, you're a blessing to all the coming generations that are able to look at your research and then take it to a next level, put some of the pieces together, and coordinate with you.
I hope so. I hope so, but at the moment they're not able to look at my research insofar as my blog's been shut down, and I haven't opened up another one. Um, we'll see. I intend to sue the SOBs,
You should.
and we'll watch and see whether I'm as smart as I think I might be, or if I'm as dumb as some people think. We'll see.
My goodness.
What up with
Yeah.
you?
Uh, you know, lots of good things. Been studying trust still. Been
Yep.
looking at some of the stuff that we've been looking at. Um, you know, it's interesting to me because there's so much complexity on the surface, it seems like, when it comes to law and all the codes and the things that we're digging through. But I feel like law is so simple in its basic form that my mind keeps going back to that, this idea of, God gave us our natural rights.
Oh yeah.
The if you want to quote the Bible and say that the greatest law is to treat each other as you want to be treated, then you start to see some of these basic concepts of what we deem as our common law rights, coming out of the natural right of contract law, the natural right of just simple things. And then it seems like mankind has taken it and deceived people with it, and so on and so forth. So my mind's been, wrapping around a lot of that stuff lately.
There's a verse in the Bible that you've seen, and someone is complaining. I believe it's the Messiah complaining that you lawyers weigh the people down with burdens that you don't pick up for yourself. I'm
Yep.
not quoting exactly, but I bet you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Well, when you see some of these laws and some of these, they are so convoluted and stressed. That's what they're doing. These are the burdens that they have laid out for ordinary men and women, and they know damn well the average man can't read the law and understand what it means.
Yep.
And then they lay these burdens out, and you are left to hire an attorney, and he does a little dance and takes your money and sends you away.
Yeah.
But it's spiritual warfare, and that's the thing that's most impressive to me. I've understood that. I've paid it lip service for the idea of spiritual warfare for at least since 2000, the late 1990s. I don't remember when I started to really grasp the idea that we're engaged in spiritual warfare, but I get it now. And when I read some of the things I read in terms of the research I've been doing, it becomes so much clearer to me that it becomes scary. I wasn't afraid of it before, but I begin to see how complete this bogus de facto system really is. It is a monster, and it's every place you look, and it's an astonishing situation because the average man doesn't see any of this. And for most of my life, neither have I. And when you do start to see it, it's amazing because you think spiritual warfare, oh, that's with the devil, and he's over in, I don't remember, someplace in Pergus or someplace like that. I can't remember hey, that's where his headquarters is, and he's not around here. No, it's all over. I mean, it's the sort of thing where we have been walking like lambs through the valley of the shadow of death, and we don't even get it. And the only thing that's really keeping us going is the good Lord.
Yeah.
You start to look around, and all of a sudden you say, oh my God, look. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
It really is. You speak about the term spiritual warfare, and the two things that pop up in my head is our personal spiritual warfare that enacts itself on the hearts of man to in the face of adversity, in the face of this devilish world, if you will, coming at us.
Mm-hmm.
Do we stand up, and how do we stand up? You see again the example laid before us in the scriptures of this man Jesus Christ, they call, standing before the Pharisees and taking the stand for the people. And you see again the example of him crucified. So we see the examples then laid before us of your JFKs and your leaders that have stood up before and just been murdered.
Yep.
And so you have this idea of those of us who have looked into some of the truth in this. How do you stand before the people, and what do you say? What is the spiritually correct things to say upon this platform of life, of where you feel like you want to make a difference? So
it is a puzzlement. It is a puzzlement. I mean, I've been trying to understand how to communicate clearly with average people, and I've been working at that for 30, 40 years, 30 years at least, all right? And without a great deal of success. There's some people who get what I'm talking about, but they are few and far between. And mostly you start talking about the kinds of ideas that we're touching on. You start talking about that with the average man, all of a sudden you learn to recognize his eyes start to squint, and he's saying, what the hell's wrong with that guy? Right? And you realize it's time to start talking about the Cowboys. I think they'll make it to the Super Bowl next year because they aren't going to do it this year. And then as soon as you start talking to the Cowboys, then his eyes relax, and okay, everything's copacetic again. But you get into some of this depth that is really challenging, and people think you're crazy.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's surprising.
Well, and once again, so you start to look at law, current events, and in the hearts and minds of man. And you say, well, wait a second, what is, again, the best argument or the best premise to bring to them? And you know that to free the minds and the hearts of the people before they could even see some of the history, you're talking about 100-something years of history that is built up to this point.
I think you're going all the way back to Eden. I think you're going all the way back to Eden. This has been going on the whole time, and mostly we miss it. We don't understand it. We see it's the Jews against the Arabs or something like that. No, this is deeper than that. This is spiritual warfare, and it has enormous depth. It's been going on, and whatever defects it has, they turn up. Some smart guy comes up and he says, wow, you guys have done such and such and such and such, and that's a mistake. All right. They learn how to paper over their own mistakes. And after they've been at it for a couple thousand years, you've got a system that it can stand there in the room with you and you
Yeah.
can't see it. It's invisible because they papered over all the big defects, and they've been identified over the years. They identify one or another, and they paper them over. The next generation has to look for fresh defects. But
Yeah.
it's hard to make sense of. But for me, what rings my bell out of the Bible is those who stand firm to the end shall be saved. I don't
Yeah.
delude myself that I'm going to save the world. I don't delude myself that I'm going to save a significant portion of the world. I am a watchman in my opinion, and it's a good blue collar job for me. Pack a lunch in a lunchbox and climb up on the wall. Keep your eyes peeled for whatever trouble you see coming, and then give the warning, sound the alarm. All right, that's what I try to do. And it says in the Bible, if they take the alarm, now that's good. That's what they should do. And if they don't take the alarm, their blood is on their hands. But if I don't sound the alarm, their blood is on my hands. I'm responsible for them. If I see the enemy coming, I've got to shout and say something about it as best I can. And after that, from my perspective, up to the good Lord. If he wants other people to understand, he'll let them understand. If he doesn't want them to understand, they won't understand. But I'm doing my part as best I can with the tools I've got. So,
Yeah. Well said. It's when you speak about the spiritual warfare of it, and you start to look at the idea of men who have spoken up against certain aspects of the system, right, and they were killed off. You start to look at, well, there's an unending number of bad men, so to speak, if you will, that
yeah,
you
I
could
agree.
for every rock that you turn over and see some corruption, there's always another one that you can find,
If
and
not
so
another 10 or 50 or 1,000.
yeah, it's unbelievable, and the amount is just mind-boggling. But when you start to look at this idea of um, the light, if you will, Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm not trying to preach Christianity. That's not the point. Because when I speak Christianity, I could easily say, well, look to the root and say what we talked about before, the law of liberty of treat your neighbors as you want to be treated. That's what I'm talking about when I say that. You could measure every country, every law, every action against the simplicity of, is it in that light of doing unto others as you want done unto yourselves? And you
Yeah,
could really go ahead. Sorry.
no, I'd say so. I'd say so. And I mean, I've been doing some research on the word liberty,
Mm.
all right? And what I've done, do you know the difference between liberty and freedom?
I looked into it a while ago, but I want you to tell me.
Well, this is my opinion. I'm not going to tell you it's God's truth, but this is my opinion. The Constitution, Declaration of Independence, makes clear that liberty flows from God.
Mm.
We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That liberty flows from God. It is a blessing, and that's borne out in the preambles of the Constitution, where they talk about the blessing of liberty, secure the blessing of liberty for the children. For their children and their prosperity. They're securing the blessing. They're recognizing liberty flows from God. It is a spiritual concept. And freedom, on the other hand, we can free the slaves. Let's do it. Sounds like a good idea. But it's something, in my opinion, men free. Men can give you freedom. God can give you liberty.
Mm.
I don't know if you catch my drift. And I'm not telling you that's God's truth. I'm saying that's the way it appears to me. Clearly, liberty flows from God. On the
Well,
other hand, but I've even found evidence in the research I've been doing that they have a second kind of liberty that varies. I don't remember the case right in front of me right now. I don't remember the case, but they're talking about liberty that varies from the East Coast to the West Coast. It varies according to where you are.
mm.
That's not God's liberty. God's liberty is fixed. His liberty for me is the same it is for you. It's the same if the Declaration of Independence is correct. Hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, that they're endowed, equally endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Blah blah blah. God gives us equal doses of liberty. The government has concocted a statutory liberty that I haven't had a chance to research yet, but I found evidence of it at the Supreme Court level.
I've seen similar, that liberty is equal to almost license, right? It's a licensed freedom.
Well, you can, from what I've learned, you can keep your freedom. I don't care about it. I'd like to have some, but I'm not going to get excited about it. But I want my liberty. I want it.
What does Patrick Henry say? Give me liberty or
give me
death.
liberty or give me death. Exactly right. Yeah. So, any case, small point, but it's just one of those curiosities you see along this journey. It's like taking a trip to California when I was a kid with my dad and my cousin. I got to look out the window and see the different things on the journey. You see a bunch of different things on this journey in spiritual warfare also. And whoa.
It's heavy. It's deep.
It's amazing. It's surprising.
So what you been researching as of the most late?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still working on the Supreme Court. I go to family law, and it's not as good as Westlaw or Lexis and the rest, that sort of thing, but it's free and it's adequate for me, and I've been using it since the 90s. I'm familiar with it, so I kind of stick with it. You can go to the Supreme Court and do a search for the words, any words you're looking for. They have a search facility there. And you're looking for liberty, fine. They produce, I don't know, I don't remember clearly, but something in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 cases where the word liberty showed up at the Supreme Court since its beginning. They've got the whole thing up there. Well, it's teaching me things and really just amazing me. It reminds me that you're not as smart as you think you are, Sonny. Here's some more stuff. Take a look at this, smart guy. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's just astonishing. And any case, that's one of the things I'm working on. One of the things you sent a list of excerpts from different cases and wherever, big list. We'll never get to it, you might get to half a dozen of them if we're lucky. But
Sure.
You were talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just propose a thought experiment for you and whatever audience you have. You can look at Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution of the United States. And it says in part, where is it? Article 1, Section 10, yeah, there it is. No state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, they can coin money, excuse me, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What kind of states are they talking about?
What kind of states are they talking about?
Yeah. Case of 1788 or thereabouts. What kind of states must they have been referring to?
States of the Union at that time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And today we live in a world where the Constitution hasn't been changed. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 remains the same. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. When was the last time you saw gold or silver coin in circulation?
Yep.
Now I'm asking you, when was the last time? Did you ever?
I'm not in my lifetime.
I don't know how old you are. I did. I'm old enough where they were still working with silver when I was up until a little past when I graduated from high school.
Okay.
But they still had silver. The gold had been removed from domestic circulation, but silver was gone. It was being replaced by paper and the rest of that sort of thing. How can they do that without violating the Constitution? The Constitution says no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. Can't pay your debts. Can't pay them without gold or silver, and they've taken the gold and silver out of circulation. How can a state do business? How can they employ people if they're paying their help with something other than gold and silver coin?
Yep.
How can they supervise your life and mine if they're not operating? How can they tax us in anything other than gold and silver coin?
Well, okay, just to touch upon that. So you said no state shall
That's right. And
make it
that's a
so.
key.
Yeah.
That's a key. No state of the union. If they had an alternate set of states, they could operate without gold or silver. No state of the union, because that's the only kind of states they had back when the Constitution was drafted. They don't say anything about territories. They don't say no territory shall make anything but gold and silver coin, a tender in payment of debt. They had territories.
Hmm.
They didn't make a proviso for gold and silver in the territories. They didn't make a proviso for gold and silver in the District of Columbia. And that was an enormous mistake, in my opinion, an oversight, a huge oversight. If they just said nobody, not in the states or territories, anything, that would be another problem. But if they could convince you that you were in a if they could trick you into thinking that you were in a state of the union when under their law, like the Uniform Commercial Code, maybe you were only in a state of the United States, a
Right.
territory of the United States, a district of the United States.
Right.
I mean, the law, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, only applies to the states of the Union. If they're not here anymore,
Right.
what's going on? And if they are here, they're acting unconstitutionally every time they touch a Federal Reserve note. There is no proviso in the Constitution for the governments of the states of the Union to use paper currency.
That's true.
Yeah. And it gets weirder than that. For my purpose of me just trying to explain this, I do this in the context of checking accounts, which I haven't had for decades.
Hmm.
But the way it worked is, imagine you're running a little store, you sell appliances, you've got a flat screen TV there for $1,000, which looks like just what I'm looking for.
Hmm.
And I walk in the door and I say, that's the one I want. Let me give you a check for $1,000. And I write a check and I hand it to you. Have you been paid?
Nope.
No, you haven't. How do you get paid?
Well, you're supposed to go to the bank, and they're supposed to give you your reimbursement for the
Not exact. Well, which bank?
Well,
My bank or yours?
I mean, I guess technically speaking, your bank would be the one, but I guess it's in our bank, right? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you dropped out for a moment there.
That was weird.
Here's the way it looks to me. And it may not function this way today, but this is the way it did function back when I was a kid. I go to the store and I give them a check.
Hmm.
That's not a payment. That's a debt. That's a promise to pay. There's a difference, all right? I give you a check with my signature on it. You take that check to your bank and drop it into your account. Your bank pulls it out of your account, sends it to my bank. My bank checks to see if I've got any money in my account. And if I do, then they have to pull the money out of my account and move it back to you. They take it to your bank, then your bank deposits in your account, and you have been paid. But the
Right.
critical point here is it's redeemed against my account. I wrote the check. I took the flat screen TV for $1,000, which is too enormous amount of money today. They're so cheap today. But I got the flat screen TV. I wrote the check. I signed it. It has to be redeemed from my account.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we could have it redeemed from your account. Now you're paying for my television set.
That's true.
Okay. Now, today, if I come in and I write you a check, or better yet, if I give you cash, how does the cash differ from the check?
In theory, it doesn't.
That's exactly right. It's another debt instrument. It's a promise to pay. And that's all it is a promise to pay. What does payment mean? It means you've been paid, you've received something tangible, either a service or a product that you've received in exchange for the flat screen TV that you provided.
Yeah.
Get paid. You're not just going to walk around with a promise to pay. As long as you got pieces of paper, they're just promises to pay. And they should be pulled out of my account because the checks should be pulled out of my account. I wrote the check. I got the benefit of the check. All right. It should be coming to me. And the payment should be coming from me. I should be responsible for redeeming the check. Take cash now in the same circumstance. I pay $1,000 in cash. Debt instruments. Who's going to pay that debt? Who's going to pay the debt? It's not signed by me. The cash is not signed by me. It's signed by the Secretary of Treasury and somebody else. Somebody from the Federal Reserve, I suppose. I don't really remember.
Right.
All right. A check is signed by them. In theory, what that means is when you collect that check from me, you can go to the Federal Reserve or you can go to the federal government and you can say, I would like tangible. I would like to be paid for this debt instrument.
Yep.
But by law, you can't redeem it with the Federal Reserve and you can't redeem it with the federal government except as tax payments. If you owe them $500 in taxes, you can give them cash and they'll take it. But that's the only way you can redeem this. What does that mean?
I mean, it's never paid.
That's exactly right. And more than that, it means that the government never redeems its debt instruments. They just give you new debt instruments.
That's exactly right.
If you had the power to pay for or seemingly pay for things with checks, you signed them, but nobody ever cashed them. By law, they can't cash any of your checks, Greg. How rich could you be? How big a house could you buy? How many cars could you have? How many wild women could you have dancing around the place right now?
Mm-hmm.
An almost infinite amount. The government doesn't pay its debts. It discharges its debts, and it's left to you to find somebody who's dumb enough to pay the government's debts. Who's dumb enough to pay the government's debts?
The American people.
That's right, including you and me.
Yes, sir.
Including you and me. When I take that $100 bill, I got to look around and say, this is a worthless piece of paper. This is just a promise to pay. I've got to find some idiot that I can give this to, and they will give me something tangible, something real, an asset, not a debt, an asset. And they'll give me this asset in return. I can go to the guy across the street, and I've got a $100 bill, and maybe I got 10 of them or 50 of them, or who knows how many I've got. But I can use them to buy his old pickup truck. Now, he has redeemed my debt instrument that I got from the government. Now, how's he get paid? Well, he stops over at your house with that $1,000 that he got out of me, and he stops over at your house and he buys a bass boat. Now you're redeeming his debt instrument. But the point is, the government does not redeem its debt instrument except with taxes. You can use it to pay taxes by law. Anything else, you go to the Federal Reserve, they don't have to redeem these things by law. They don't have to give you anything. It's like I'd go into your store, I see a flat screen TV, I give you $1,000 for it, but I never get the TV. At least not from you. I get it from some other idiot. All right, out on the street someplace. Hey, buddy, you got a flat screen TV? Give you $1,000 for it. They take the deal. The people are redeeming the government's debts.
Yep, that's the only reason why it has value.
Its bills. That's the only reason they tell you that. This is the full faith and credit of the American people. As long as the people are dumb enough to think that these pieces of paper are payments rather than just debt instruments, this system can go on almost indefinitely.
Yep.
But if the public ever wakes up and realizes, wait a second, I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid for my labor. I'm not getting paid for, whatever it is I produce, whatever I've saved, or if I'm not being paid for my savings, I'm getting promises to pay. And then it's not from the people who issued the $100 bill, it's from the people who accept the $100 bill. Next dummy, I don't know if that makes much sense to you, if you see what I'm talking about. But
absolutely,
me,
it's a hot potato.
It's a hot potato. The government, no wonder government gets so big. Yep. No wonder government gets so big. How big could I be if I never had to pay my debts?
Yep. I just heard a quote last week. They were talking about that I want to say it was two different Federal Reserve chairmen in some paraphrase quote or another said, the American government will never have a problem paying its debts because it could always print more money.
Yeah.
it's the
Well, that's
most.
not exactly true, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's it
They print
in
more currency. They don't print more money. They don't use any
well
money.
said,
Money is gold.
well said,
I,
and
they
that
can.
was it. Go ahead, go ahead.
No, that's his. He's saying print money. What he's saying is these Federal Reserve notes are money. No, they're not. In my opinion, money must be an asset. It must have intrinsic value for itself. That's money. Federal Reserve notes have no intrinsic value. I
Let,
mean, the
let's
value.
Well, let's look at that. Let's look at the quote you were saying from the Constitution: "Coin money or emit bills of credit." Those are two different things.
Yeah, that's a section. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 is a number of things. There's half a dozen different things. No state shall enter into any territorial alliance or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. All I'm focusing on, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. It's not
Right,
a payment of debt. They're
right.
telling you, if it's not gold and silver, it's not a payment of debt. It's right there in the Constitution. And it's there for a reason. Why do you think they haven't changed it?
Yep,
Why haven't they amended it and crossed it out and say, forget that? Government can issue payment.
yep. Well, and in the 1933 Banking Act, when they no longer allowed people to demand gold and silver for the obligation of contracts,
Yep.
and they made Federal Reserve notes the only thing. What they used that language. They didn't say payment of debt. They said every debt will be discharged dollar for
Yeah.
dollar.
Yeah. Yeah. It's there if you can read.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got to rely on a dictionary. It's, I can spend a half hour reading a single sentence sometimes when I'm doing research. You start to look at it and say, "Oh my God, look at this, look at this." You start to deal with the implications and the inferences and the rest of this sort of thing. I can spend half hour on a single sentence. It doesn't happen often, but it can. Uh, there's that much packed into this stuff. And if you want to deal with the system, you must master the English language. You've really got to be a great grammarian, and I'm not. But
Yeah.
in the land of the blind, one-eyed man is king, and I'm kind of that one-eyed man or one of them.
Man, it's wild. It's really
It's not
wild.
just wild; it's treasonous. It's treacherous. It's you look at this stuff and you think, well, it's just a mistake. Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. Yes, it
Yeah.
matters. It matters enormously. You're not paying your bills. How long can that go on?
Yep.
How long can we get away with not paying our bills?
Well, and now you're talking about internationally now.
Sure, I'm talking about both domestic and international. There's going to be a time when there are retired people that have a bunch of U.S. Treasury notes squirreled away in their safety deposit box or in their pension fund. There's going to be a day when the government has to admit, sorry, we can't pay those.
Yep.
All right, and you can't get anybody else dumb enough to cash them. Everybody else out on the street saying, I'm going to take a damn Treasury note. If you
Yep.
want a new car, you better come up with some money. Show me the gold.
Exactly.
Yeah,
All right. Can you see the screen?
I can.
All right. So this is Mr. Thomas Jefferson. So this is we could remember they just had the revolution happen, and they had just had their experiences with the Bank of England, which from my understanding had been taken over by private control through the Rothschild banking movement at that time. Do you recall that being the history at that time?
A little more or less. I'm not. I don't have, scholarly credentials for that, but I understand what you're talking about. I recognize the quote as
Okay.
coming from Jefferson.
All right. Well, so the people of America at that time were being forced to pay their taxes in gold, and nonetheless, they just had their experience with the Bank of England, and Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow the private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent father is conquered. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies, and the issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people, to whom it properly belongs. Speak to us about that. What do you think about that quote?
Well, I believe it's basically true. It's what it tells us is that there were people who understood the dangers of the credit system, the debt system. They understood that those dangers when this country was in its infancy. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's been going on for people who are truly knowledgeable about this. They probably can trace it back into the Roman Empire and earlier than that. I believe the old Roman Empire, I don't know for a fact, I haven't studied this, but what I understand is that they started issuing their denarius or whatever it is, and they would clip a little off the coin.
Mm.
They'd issue a gold coin, but they'd take some sort of a clipper and clip just a little, fraction of an ounce off each gold coin, and they'd pile them up. And if you handled enough gold coins and clipped enough, all of a sudden you can find yourself with a bunch of money that you didn't earn. Right? Well, the point I'm making is this business about money is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on, and it's shameful that Jefferson would make a quote out of this, and everybody else said, yeah, sure, whatever you say, Tom. Now, somebody passed me some of those paper notes. Well, I want to take my girlfriend out on the town.
Yeah.
People don't get it, and the people who do get it generally exploit it, and that's one of the quotes. That's one of the quotes that you also send down here, essentially saying that most people they have no idea of what's going on with money, not a clue. And if they do, they tend to exploit that knowledge for their own advantage, and they become participants in the scheme. And that's one of the quotes that you sent over here. I don't have it right in front of me, but you know what I'm talking about.
I got it.
So what we're dealing with here is not just there's a bunch of nefarious bastards who are running the banking system that are trying to exploit us, and the government perhaps, that are trying to exploit us. We've got a situation that can be traced to one fundamental cause. And that's public ignorance.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Which comes
go ahead.
Well, comes back down to self-education.
I agree.
Right? It's a very difficult thing because you have self-education, and then you have a system which seemingly keeps the people ignorant, keeps these topics out of the general public's view, certainly out of the education system.
Yep.
It's a real quagmire.
Yeah, it's a quagmire, but I mean, it's one of the things where there's a quote that goes back. I don't know who's responsible for the quote, but he says people get the kind of government they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And insofar as we would rather not study the nature of money, we're going to get the kind of government that deprives us of real money.
Yep. I think it was Woodrow Wilson who I'm going to seriously paraphrase, who basically said that people are going to be, if they want to have sovereignty, then they have to act sovereign. They have to be responsible. They have to, and that includes, there's a lot of people who say that the founding fathers each had a Bible and Blackstone's commentaries on their shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So to understand one's rights at a basic biblical level, right? So now you're talking about, like you said, seeing the freedoms or seeing the liberties coming from God, and then being able to understand law enough to be able to define those rights that come from God.
Yeah, but you also have to be able to resist the temptation of a free lunch.
Mm.
I mean, people are not merely ignorant because they don't want to study. That's a big part of it, maybe the majority of it. But the other part of it is, look, if you know what's going on, you can get a free lunch.
You're absolutely
and a free
right.
dinner and a free house and whatever else, and you can be part of the racket, right? And you can profit from the racket. And people say, well, I'm not taking a lot, it's not like I'm one of the Rothschilds or something like that. Yeah, I'm stealing a little bit on my mortgage, or I'm stealing a little bit on my car payment or something like that. And people want it. They want cheap money. They want inflation. so they can borrow money and pay it off with cheaper dollars. That's what the government wants. The government wants inflation. The Federal Reserve wants deflation. They want to be paid back for the dollars they've loaned with dollars that have become more valuable. I lend you $1,000, you pay me back, you'll pay me back $1,000. But by the time you pay me back, those dollars in deflation are worth maybe $1.20 each, which means you're going to pay me $1,200 on the $1,000 loan. I'm getting over. If I'm a banker, deflation works for me just fine because people are paying their debts back or trying to pay their debts back, going through the motions with more expensive dollars. But inflation is what's good for the government of the United States. It's the biggest lender in the world, or excuse me, biggest borrower in the world. They want inflation. Inflation is not an accident. All right, it's not, oh, gee, we have inflation. What do we do? What do we do? No, they want inflation, and they want lots of it so they can continue to discharge their debts with cheaper and cheaper pieces of paper. You know, you can look at the Federal Reserve and the government. They seem to be operating in lockstep. They seem to be conspiring on one level. But there's debate as to who is really in charge. Who's running the show? Is it the government or the Federal Reserve? What do you think?
I would say the Federal Reserve.
I would say not. I'd say you're wrong. I'd say they're running because, and the reason I say that is you can look at a graph. You can find them any place you want to go on the internet that deals with monetary issues, and you can see that the value of the dollar has dropped from 100 pennies per piece of paper. A $1 piece of paper back around 1970, it was worth 100 pennies in purchasing power. Today, it's worth 3 or 4 pennies in purchasing power.
Right.
That is persistent inflation. It's been going on for 50 years. And that is good for government because government is the biggest borrower in the world. It's terrible for the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve doesn't like it. And it's an insight from my perspective to recognize that the Federal Reserve and the federal government are natural antagonists. They're not there to be buddies. If I'm the biggest borrower in the world and you're the biggest lender, I want inflation so I can pay off my debts in cheaper dollars. You want deflation so you can get paid back in more valuable dollars. That's a conflict. And it's gone from the dollar was worth 100 cents to where the dollar is worth less than a nickel today in terms of purchasing power, comparative purchasing power. That tells me that inflation has been predominant. It tells me that the federal government is running the show and the Federal Reserve is just, ultimately, it's going to be a sacrificial lamb. They're going to shut down the Federal Reserve because they can't pay the debt. One way or another, the Federal Reserve won't be able to issue any more. If we can't borrow any more money from the Federal Reserve, they will be sacrificed, and the government of the United States will continue to chug along like a great big super freight train. I don't know if you follow that.
Well,
it's
I think
important to understand they're natural adversaries. These guys are not working together. They go hand in hand, but they're adversaries.
Well, I guess I'm going to push back on that a little bit, and
go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to go back again to the quote of
Rothschild.
Well, it's a combination of all these things. So we have Jefferson, who's talking about if the American people ever allowed this to happen. We know that the Federal Reserve, if we go down and look at some of the other quotes, is a private corporation. It's a conglomeration of corporate. It's a trust, if you will, of various entities, but it's a private organization. And so now you have the American government on behalf of the American people. So the American people sign over their rights to decision-making power to the federal government, whether they choose to outright or not. The American government, right? It's presumed. So the American government. That's why Jefferson is saying that the people will eventually it will deprive the people of the property, because the property is now what is being placed as a lien against all the Federal Reserve notes of each issued bill, issued dollar.
The people's private property, exactly right. And this is what I'm talking about with that example I tried to present earlier in the program, where I'm saying, how do I redeem my dollars? I don't
Right.
redeem them with the Federal Reserve. I don't redeem them with the federal government. I've got to go find some idiot out on the street and say, would you take these worthless pieces of paper and trade for your truck
Right.
or your home or whatever? And if I can, haha, I've redeemed, but not against the guy that wrote the Federal Reserve notes. Those are loaned into circulation. He's getting a free ski. He's getting a flat screen TV, but he's getting you or me or whoever to pay for it.
Well, exactly right. There seems to be no theoretical issue with us having quote unquote script, SCRIP, that circulates within our country domestically. But the problem is that we're borrowing it against with an interest. Our government has every ability to federally issue its own circulating currency. It would certainly be nice to be able to be backed by something of value, but we could all agree, as we do already, we already agree to trade this worthless piece of paper for things. But the problem is that we're borrowing it with interest, and that interest is backed by the full faith and credit of the American people's property. And that's what you have Jefferson talking about here. And then so now you're saying who's running the show? Well, if you have someone like Rothschild saying something like this, and we know that there's the
But he doesn't
politicians.
have control of the nation's money. He has control of the nature's currency today.
Correct. But let me
Money is
now
gold.
let me pull up another quote if I can. Where is it? Man, if I could. Um, Gosh, what do I do with it? Okay, here it is right here. So under Ronald Reagan, 1984, 100% of what is collected from the income tax, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by the interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on the services that taxpayers expect from government. So we have today's services that are being offered by the federal government, whether it be Medicaid, Medicare, and all sorts of things that make politicians popular in their current heyday or whatever. When they're looking to get elected, they're going to offer all sorts of things,
Sure.
benefit programs that they're able to achieve by borrowing more money that tomorrow's children will pay for.
Maybe. I
Maybe.
mean, that's not a good. I'm telling you, you're going to get to a time when the kids wake up and they say, screw that. Grandma and grandpa, you're on your own. You ought to be paying your own debts, not just laying them off by going deeper into debt where the debt is going to be left for your grandchildren. That's just wrong. It's immoral. You should be paying your own debts, and grandma and grandpa are going to, and I'm grandma and grandpa. You understand? I'm that
Abs-
age. I'm not a kid, but my generation is going to get stuck with this, and they're going to say, you pay your own bills, grandma and grandpa. I want to, because kids right now don't have enough money to buy a house. They want to start a family, have some children of their own, and get married and that sort of thing. They can't do that. We are living in a situation that is, I won't say they can't do it, but it's not as easily done as it was back when I was a kid. I can
you're
remember
absolutely right.
going to town when I was a teenager, high school, rest of that. In my recollection, it's probably mistaken, but it seemed like about one woman out of every four was pregnant. You don't see that anymore. I
Mm.
mean, a pregnant woman on the streets of Dallas, or where I live in Garland, just in Dallas County, but I mean, pregnant women? Well, maybe if they're wearing a burqa, uh, but in terms of people who live here, we can't. The government has taken so much of our money from us in the form of taxes
Yeah.
that we can't afford to have children anymore.
Well, and you said inflation. People might think, oh, well, I'm getting such and such amount of dollars, but the purchasing power of the dollar today is not worth what it was.
No, not a fraction. It's worth a nickel compared to what it was, or compared to what it was in 1970 or thereabouts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that means somebody's getting ripped off. And it might not be obvious yet, but it's going to be obvious. They're going to live. Who are the principal creditors in this country right now? The old people. I don't know that I can actually say that the principal creditors, but they are significant creditors. They've lended money to the government. They've lended their wealth, their energy, their creativity, their productivity. They have effectively loaned that to the government in return for Federal Reserve, in return for Treasury notes. sooner or later, those treasury notes are going to be shown to be worthless or nearly so. And when they do, everybody who's depending on them, they're going to get busted. They're going to lose their assets. And it's not something that's easily explained, I guess, but I'm unable to see there's not going to be a happy ending on this thing. The only question is, when does it hit the fan? Might
Yeah, you're right.
it
Well,
could hit the fan this year, and it might not hit the fan for 10 years. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And they can't dismount. They can't get off the tiger. All right? They have to use we have a debt-based monetary system. They have to use debt instruments to make that system operate. When I was a kid, we had an asset-based monetary system. It was backed by silver and gold.
yeah,
Gold was gone before I was around, but basically we had an asset-based monetary system. You paid your debts with assets. And if you wanted to become wealthier, all right, you want to be a wealthy guy, you want to show off to your girlfriend that you've really got a lot of money and the rest of that, what do you need? You need more assets. You need more gold. You need more silver. You walk your girlfriend into the vault you got built in the house there, and you've got half a ton of gold or half a ton of silver or whatever. She's going to be impressed. You want to be wealthy, you got to have assets because
yep.
you're in an asset-based monetary system. What do you have to have in today's system, which is debt-based?
Credit.
Debt. Well, same thing.
Yep.
What's the difference between credit and debt?
Nothing.
It's your ability to go into debt that determines whether you're going to live in a house that has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths and a swimming pool, or if you're going to live in a hut.
Right.
It is your ability to absorb debt. Somebody says, oh yeah, I think your credit rating is your capacity to go into debt.
Yep.
If you can't go into debt, the average man, you're going to live in a rat hole.
Yep.
Right? Debt is what drives this country right now, and we can't just turn around and say, oh, we're going to change and we're going to have assets. No, you're not. When this thing changes, all of the debt is going to be revoked, or most of it. You might be able to get 10% or 20% paid, but 80-90% of the debt, in my opinion, is going to be canceled. It's going to be rendered void, and that's the form of wealth that we depend on. All of a sudden, you're going to be walking around and say, "You mean I can't take these $100 bills and pay for a flat screen TV?" We might give it to you we might take those debt instruments, but not 10 of them. We'd have to have 50 of them. 50. All right. That's what happened in Venezuela and the rest of these countries. They go into the superinflation.
Yep. You just reminded me of I spoke to out of Virginia. Shoot, I just forgot his name. I feel embarrassed. There was a delegate.
I do it all the time. As you get older, it
oh my
becomes a
goodness.
more common occurrence.
Oh man, delegate. So it's a delegate out of Virginia. Again, I'm really embarrassed. I forgot his name. I'll have to look it up. But he presented in 2011 a bill across the Virginia legislature for Virginia to create an alternative currency because of the inevitable, what he called the inevitable destruction or the self-destruction of the Federal Reserve System.
Yep.
And they laughed him off of, they created a little commission and they studied it, and then they said, no, we're not going to do that. That's not within
Did they kill him?
They didn't kill him. He's still alive. I spoke to him about a month ago, and he's doing well. But it was really ridiculous. I think there was, I looked it up on YouTube, and at that time, some of the news reports that came out, were making fun of him. They were talking about how ridiculous he was. It was just unfortunate to the highest degree how much they slandered this man, and he's speaking plain truth.
I know. One of the things I used to publish a magazine called the Anti-Shyster.
Yep.
And I published for about 12 years altogether. You still there?
I'm still here. Yep.
Okay, I didn't say the image disappeared. You must have. All right. One of the things I learned in the early 90s, I started publishing about 1990, and I thought I knew it. I thought, oh yeah, I got this all scoped out. I'm really smart. I started receiving letters from people and documents and one thing and another. And when I discovered that I wasn't publishing because I was smart, I was publishing because I was dumb. But these people educated me, and they brought things to my attention that I had never imagined before. And they really, I did with the magazine, it educated me a great deal. And one of the things I learned is that you can do a lot of stunts and the government doesn't care. They might come after you and they might not. They don't care if you pay your income tax. They don't really care if there's a bunch of stuff that you can do, and you can sit back and conspire to assassinate the president. And they might come after you and they might not. All right? No big deal.
Hmm.
Because they got plenty other people to be president. All right? You can knock off 99 and there's still 99 more who could be president. All right? It's not a big deal. But if you mess with the money system,
Hmm.
they will jump on you with both feet. And over time, I heard the stories of people who tried to devise these different currency systems and one thing and another. They tried to change, what they have. Oh, they were writing their own money orders. I can't remember, but they were writing their own money orders. And it's a good way to get yourself sent to the slammer.
Yep.
Right? And what
I've
it
seen
told
them.
me, the money system is the heart of darkness for the whole system.
Hmm.
All right? This is what makes it go. We are what make the money system work. The whole thing holds together because the public believes that these phony baloney fiat dollars they have some value, and that they're money, and they're not. They're just currency. They're just debt instruments, and almost nobody gets that.
Yep.
Right? Well,
With
anyway, but it told me, you mess with the money system, they're coming for
You said it right.
you. Yeah.
Everyone we've seen before. I mean, there's lists and lists of people who have lost their lives, from Abraham Lincoln, I believe, when he
Oh
issued,
yeah, 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 yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. You mess with it, it's not just the it's not just the patriots, they fool around with the money system and the rest of it. It's not just the patriots who take it in the neck. You get up there, John F. Kennedy,
Yep, absolutely.
right? He he had printed, according to reports that may be credible, he had printed, I don't know how much, greenbacks, all right, instead of Federal Reserve notes.
You talking about JFK?
Yeah,
You talking about the silver certificates?
I don't remember. I don't know that he was going to print silver certificates, but he was going to print greenbacks, meaning they would be issued by the government
Right.
rather than the Federal Reserve, and there wouldn't be any interest on them.
Oh yeah, it was
Now he
silver.
wasn't giving us real money, but he was giving us
No, no,
interest-free money.
no. I believe in actuality he was, and maybe I'm incorrect, but maybe if somebody can correct us in the comment section on YouTube. But I believe that JFK was issuing the silver certificates, and backed by silver, issued by the American government outside of the Federal Reserve.
Well, I don't know what the answer is, and I'm just saying he touched the third rail of politics, and that's the money system.
Yeah.
You mess with that in a meaningful way, and they'll gut you. I mean, you're going to get hurt if you're not blessed or awfully, lucky. You're going to be gutted. And it tells you, if you want to learn what's going on here, take a look at the money system and see if you can make sense of it.
All right, here it is right here. Executive Order 11110, delegating to the Secretary of the Treasury the President's authority to issue silver certificates under the Thomas Amendment.
Okay. All right, you're right about the silver certificates. So far as I know, he had them printed, but they were never issued. But he was on the verge of doing it.
Yeah.
And
Well, I believe his father, Joe Kennedy, had made a statement that you vote for my son and we'll end the Federal Reserve. Don't quote me on that, but I believe there's something similar.
I've never
Uh,
heard it before. That doesn't mean anything.
Interesting that we're speaking on this, just to touch upon this idea. One of the things I had read earlier. Well, let me even touch upon the Bible. There's a Bible quote that said the debtor is slave to the creditor,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Lender,
So
creditor.
So we have the idea of a debt slave.
Yep,
We spoke about last time that we had had a conversation. We were talking about man or other animal,
absolutely.
right? And
Yep.
we said that in order to treat what was the let's see under Weiss's when he was talking about Weiss was talking about that government where is it? I'm sorry. In rem jurisdiction. So jurisdiction over a thing can only exist if a man or woman is a slave, property or res, and that's right here. And then they talk about that case, the Zong, where they're talking about throwing slaves overboard off the ship that was traveling.
Yep.
They were treating them as cargo. So
Even in
to
the Constitution, it says slaves are going to be counted for representation in Congress on the basis of 3/5 of a man for every slave.
yeah, there you go.
They only recognized slave as 60% of a man, and that was to be render him a thing. A man is what they're talking about in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That's a
Yep,
created man, not an evolved man.
yep.
Evolved man is an animal.
Well,
Created
and
man is a child of God. All right,
exactly.
and we're the ones who get those unalienable rights if we can enforce them. And the government doesn't want them. You know, the third sentence in the Declaration of Independence, after they've said, they start out second sentence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Then the third, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not all of them, but that's three they wanted to mention. Then the next sentence is that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And they are telling us the purpose of government as envisioned by the founding fathers was the prime directive was to secure to each man and woman and even unborn child their God-given unalienable rights. That's what this country started with.
Yep.
And government doesn't want responsibility for securing our God-given unalienable rights. Government finds it more convenient to kick us around. So what do? They change our status from that of men made in God's image to animals. Animals don't have any rights.
Yep.
They might have an expectation of some rights and the rest of that sort of thing, but this is an extraordinary abuse of power. This is an act of genocide. You know, the Jews, whatever happened in Nazi Germany relative to the Jews and the Nazis, it started in the Nuremberg Act of 1935, which is where they declared the Jews to be animals, subhuman, Untermenschen. All right. 1935, once they declared the Jews to be Untermenschen, then you could kill them, kick them around, treat them just like cows and pigs and goats. You
Mhm.
could move them off to a concentration camp. You can exterminate them, subject to mass murder, subject to genocide. It's all okay because they're not men and women made in God's image. You can look in Genesis 9:6, if I recall correctly. And they tell you the reason you can't murder a man. What is it? Do you know?
No, tell me.
Because he's made in God's image.
Let's see right here.
That is, yeah. I believe it's 9:6, Genesis 9:6, if I recall correctly.
Says whoever sheds human blood by human shall their blood be shed, for in the image of God has God made mankind.
Yeah, that's why you can't commit murder, because you're made in God's image. I'm made in God's image. It's been the foundation for the crime of murder for a couple of thousand years. We're made in God's image. There's that presumption. All right. If you're not made in God's image, you are no better than a cow, a pig, a sheep, goat, whatever, and we can have you for dinner, not just kill you, eat you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the moment we get, I mean, I spotted that in the Bible. I don't remember when, 5 years ago, 10, I don't remember when it was. I haven't heard it from anybody else in my lifetime. I haven't heard it. That's the
Mm.
reason murder is a sin, because we're made in God's image. Government has created a status for us where it presumes us to be animals. What does that mean? They can kill us anytime they want, just like the Nazis killed the Jews. And this status as animals goes back at least to 1906, Pure Food and Drug Act. They define both food and drugs in terms of man or other animals, which means this has been around. I learned it in 2006. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm the first layman to figure out what this means on a spiritual basis.
Yeah, it's
And it's been
fantastic.
there for 100 years. At that point,
Unbelievable.
in 1906, I found it when a century they'd been doing it in the Pure Food and Drug Act, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. That whole thing is based on the presumption that you are nothing but livestock. You don't have any more rights than the cat you let out a little while ago.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And that's where you say, oh my God, you think you're just fooling around with a little political stuff. No, this is spiritual warfare. This is serious business. This is the same stuff that got the Jews murdered in Germany. And the government has been, they haven't killed us all or tried to just yet, so far as I know. But it's why they can favor the drug companies. The drugs are tested against what? Against men who are presumed to be livestock and animals. They don't have an obligation to take care of you.
And we've seen them treat men that exact way. We've seen them
That's
test.
exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. And we sit back and say, gee, this is so confusing. It's so hard to understand. I mean, this is some sort of an aberration. No, it's not. It's
No.
what they're doing. And I'll tell you another thing, and I probably told you this the last time we talked, but people wrote to me when I first published the articles on man or other animals back in 2006. And people wrote to me, and we did radio programs that went internationally by shortwave and also by internet eventually. And we had people listening to the program in England and people listening in Australia and New Zealand. And I had someone who wrote to me from England, and he said, I heard your article about your presentation on man or other animals, and I looked into the definition of drugs for England. And he told me that the definition of drugs in England also presumed the people to be animals.
Wow.
Now, I've never verified it myself, but that's what he told me. I had another one who contacted me from either New Zealand or Australia. I don't remember which. All right? But he said he checked it. I said, well, I looked up the definition of drugs, and it's the same thing. What does that mean? It means this is a fundamental cornerstone,
It's
a
an
fundamental
international.
principle. That's right, for the New World Order.
Yeah.
Can you say, bah?
Yeah.
Ruff, ruff, ruff. Could be down there feeding with your cats before this is all over, unless.
Well, and like you said, this is spiritual warfare. I mean, we're
Yes, it
seeing
is.
we're seeing it on all levels. We're seeing, them talking about it in terms of drugs, how they're I mean, just their general look towards the population as a whole.
Yes. Definition of drugs, definition of food, definition of medical devices are all based on man or other animals. Right? There is no medicine in the United States that isn't based on the principle that you and I are nothing but livestock. There are no drugs, billions of dollars of profit. You understand? To drug companies that are operating on the principle that you and I are nothing but livestock. This is a big situation. This is a big issue. This is, I am obsessed with it, and not the least of which because I discovered it. So it makes you tends to make me obsessive about it. But this is the biggest story in the last century. There's nothing to compare on this thing. The government of the United States is committing acts of genocide against the American people, and it's been doing it since before the word for genocide even existed. Genocide, the word came out after the World War II. The government's been treating us like animals or recognizing us in the status of animals since 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act.
Yep. Now let's take a step back for a moment and say, what is government? And what is government comprised of, and why would government be doing this other than for power?
That's right.
And who are the Go ahead.
Well, this is Declaration of Independence talks about. Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
And then we start looking at the idea of republic, which is what was mentioned in the Constitution, versus democracy.
No,
Democracy.
it doesn't say a republic. It says a republican form of government, and it's only guaranteed expressly to the states. It never said that this republican form of government applied to the United States government. It never said that it applies to territories. It only applies to the states of the Union. Clearly, that can't be denied, in my opinion. But the states of the Union may not be here. The only thing that makes me optimistic is it was declared to be a perpetual union, styled the United States of America by the Articles of Confederation. That states of the Union are still here. They're perpetual. They're declared to be so in the Articles of Confederation.
Yep.
Nobody may be at home. They may not have any officers or whatever in there working in that. Where I was going with this. What happened?
Can you see my screen still?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
USA, the Republic. See, a lot of people get obsessed about this republic. This is a special deal. This is not just a republic. Remember the Soviet Union? It was a union of Soviet socialist republics. They didn't mislabel the country. You can be communist and live in a republic. All right, democracy is a republic, but the Republican form was special. It was the one that presumed, in my opinion, that we got our main rights from God, and the fundamental business of government is to secure those rights. If I've got my rights from God, the government is my servant. All right? If I don't have my rights from God, the government is my master. If I got my rights from God, they got to say, yes, boss, what do you want? What can we do for you today? Well, go get me some fresh groceries or whatever. I don't mean that they are your slaves, but they are your servants. That's the Republican form. Government is your servant. All right? The republic, anything. Everybody, I live in a republic. Well, big damn deal. So did all the communists. It's just stupid.
Well, this is how deep this stuff goes. So if we look at if we presume that when they kicked the King of England out, that as the Supreme Court said, the sovereignty devolved upon the people.
Yep.
So if you could stop there for a moment and look at the quote unquote theoretical framework of what was happening, and we have sovereignty devolving upon the people, then the people looked to themselves and they said, and I'm just now getting into the minds of the people at that time, they said, well, we can't have an absolute anarchy. We still know that we need some kind of governance. So we're going to create this government that's limited by a constitution and the Bill of Rights. And
it was bigger than that.
Go ahead.
The Republican form, in my opinion, is the one. The government, I've looked up Supreme Court cases where they say, we don't know what the Republican form is anymore. We've forgotten what it was. Nobody reminded us, and we don't have any way of figuring it out. And it's true that the Republican form of government that we see reference to in the Constitution, it's not defined. And people say, oh my God, what a terrible oversight by the government. I don't believe it was oversight. It's what they had at the time. The Republican form is what they put in when the Declaration of Independence created 13 individual states, right, who were as separate as France is from Germany. That's what the Declaration of Independence created. Then we came to the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation created a perpetual union where those 13 states became connected together. All right? And then you have the article, then you have Northwest Territorial Ordinance, and then finally you have the Constitution. Northwest Ordinance provided for the territories. We had no provide. One of the things about it, Washington, D.C. is a territorial entity, in my opinion. But it doesn't exist in the United States of America. It exists within the United States, but it does not exist within the United States of America. And I'm sure that some people listening to this program right now say, that guy's Adask has lost his mind. He's talking crazy talk. No, I'm not. There is no proviso. The weakness in the original Articles of Confederation was that they made no proviso for territories. They thought they were going to be lucky to survive. And it turned out they got big and they had all this land. And what are we going to do with these territories? How are we going to run them? The big change from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution of the United States was a tolerance for territories in the United States. There's no proviso for territories in the Articles of Confederation. All right? If you're in the Union, there's no territories in the Union. All right? No Washington, D.C., no government districts. It's all states of the Union. Government didn't want that. They wanted to get away from the states of the Union. That's where our main rights, our best rights, our God-given unalienable rights, that's where they exist more so than anywhere else. They want to get away from that and get you into some other states. We don't have gold and silver coin to be one of the hallmarks of being in some kind of a state, but it's not a state of the Union. It's why we don't have gold and silver coin. It's one of the consequences. And if they could pull the gold out, pull the silver out, then we don't have a gold. Then we don't have a state of the Union.
Yep.
They can put us into some other emergency venue based on emergency, so far as I'm able to understand. There's a bunch of people that have studied this and written on it. I'm not one of them, but I mean, this has been going on, and I know how insane. I try to make an explanation on this, and I know I've got to sound like I've lost my mind. And I don't blame people for thinking so, and I might be mistaken. That's the truth of the matter. But I've been at this since 1990. All right. Seriously, I've actually been at it since 1983, trying to understand, trying to make sense, and I haven't been completely unsuccessful. Like where I ran into the man or other animals thing is when I had volunteered to be a fiduciary for a trust. There was a defendant in a case that had been going on since 2001, and I joined in 2006. There were husband and wife and their corporation. They were the three original defendants. Then another man named Ben Taylor and his trust and his corporation, he joined in, and they added him as they made him as defendants. And the whole thing was over colloidal silver. And they wanted, on instructions from the United States government at the Food and Drug Administration, they said, get these people out of business. And they told Texas to do that, and Texas said, yes, boss, whatever you say. Well, where was I going with this?
Well, you got to man and other animals because that was the whole crux.
Yeah, that's where I discovered man or animals. And each one of the defendants, when I volunteered to be fiduciary, I thought it would just. The only reason I volunteered is I wanted to prove to Ben Taylor that I was serious about what I was saying. And I would talk, and he didn't like to talk in public. All right. So I wasn't bashful about it. And I was looking for it. I'd have a soapbox. I could stand up and say things in court, the rest of that sort of thing. Whoopee. This is still being prosecuted by the Attorney General of the state of Texas. All right, they'd invested $500,000 in 6 years in this thing before they finally let it drop. Right? Wow. They let it drop after I said, wait a second, I'm a man. I'm not an animal, and your drug laws don't apply to me. All right? I'm a created man, and your drug laws don't apply to me because they say they are for man or other animals. You can't impose those regulations on me without denying me my freedom of religion. All right? So, in any case, I don't know where I was going with this, but one of my standard little speeches. Once you find that, they dropped the case. The government dropped the case. They didn't say why. They just dropped it. They stopped coming after coming for 6 years. And they spent roughly $500,000 on pretrial investigations and pretrial hearings. And we know because the Assistant Attorney General, Raul Noriega, told us. Wow. It was just offhand remarks, but I'm taking him at his word. All right? They saw this coming. The whole damn system is based on the presumption that we're nothing but livestock. And if it can be fully mastered, if you can fully understand that idea, and you can You can advocate the idea. You can pick up and recognize your spiritual implications coming out of the Bible. I believe I could walk around with a kilo of heroin under one arm and a kilo of cocaine under the other, and I have no interest in either one. I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
They got a problem here. They dropped the whole case, and we didn't know what to do. I mean, this was a blessing of God. He was guiding us on what was going on here.
Yeah.
The only thing that scared me in the entire case is we'd come to court in Austin, Texas, for hearings periodically and the rest of that sort of thing. And Ben would bring a small bottle of virgin olive oil that had been prayed over by his prayer group back in Utopia, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He would anoint all four corners of the courthouse, and on some occasions, he would anoint the chair that the judge was going to sit in. Right? But and I tell you, the only thing, did you anoint it? Did you anoint it? It was the only thing that scared me. I was, oh my God, what happens if he doesn't anoint the courthouse? We did that, and I guarantee you, I have no doubt to this day that the good Lord's hand was in there. He showed me that man or other animals. He essentially stuck my nose in it. First time I thought, why, these idiots, they don't even know how to write. And then I saw it a second time in the Texas law. And then after, they simply stopped coming. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't say we dropped it. They left us alone for about 5 years. And then they sent us notice that the case had been non-suited. They'd non-suited the case that they had begun to prosecute. Right?
Interesting.
And the case was dropped. All right. We never moved for it. We could have, all right, but we didn't really know what to do. And so we just figured best just sit. All right. You don't know what to do. Don't stand up and make it worse, Sit down.
That's unbelievable.
3-4 years later, the law in Texas was changed. And the definition of drugs that we had relied on in this case was changed from man or other animals to man or animals. They deleted the word other from the, now, I don't know for an absolute fact that they did that because of the case we'd filed and the argument we'd presented, but I think I certainly like to think that they did. I like to think we had that much effect on them. It is unusual to see laws like that changed. So now they're not, but it doesn't mean they still don't regard us as animals, because there are two kinds of men, so man or animals. Okay.
What did they change?
They deleted the word other from the existing definition of animals drugs, that we relied on to put this religious freedom defense together. If it says man or other animals, it means man is an animal. I can say a cow or other animals. Makes perfect sense. I can say a horse or other animals. Animals is
right.
class.
Oh, I agree with you, but
if I say a rock or other animals, little kids can tell that's not a rock. Daddy, a rock is not an animal. Little kids know it. 5-year-old kids know enough. All right,
Mm-hmm.
Adults don't. Kids know it. Adults don't. But they changed the law. They deleted the other.
But it says it right here.
Where are you?
Right here under the definition of drug.
And where are you reading it?
Did you see it on the screen?
Yeah, to man or other animals. Yes.
There's the source.
That's federal.
Oh,
That's
you're talking
federal.
about for the state.
I'm talking about Texas. Texas
Oh.
deleted. All right, federal stayed the same, but Texas deleted the definition. All right. So the point is, there is at least a good chance that, as crazy as I may sound at times, I've helped to implement a change in the law. Put them in a position where they said, we can't fight this thing.
Wow.
We can't fight this. We can't let the people find out that we're treating them as animals. And Texas backed off on that. Maybe. But the thing about it is there's two kinds of men at least. There's created man. Genesis 1:26-28 says, on the sixth day God created man in his image and gave man dominion over the animals. Created man can't be an animal. Created man is made in God's image. Created man has dominion over the animals. Okay? You can't pass a law that says I'm an animal without interfering with my freedom of religion. This is the second most important principle in the Bible.
You're absolutely
That
right.
man is made in God's image. All right. If that's not true, then neither is Judaism and neither is Christianity. You wipe out the whole thing. If you say, "Oh no, you're not made in God's image. You are not distinguished from the animals," you can't do it. All right. You can't do it. This is a political non-starter. It is not possible to do this in public. You can sneak around and do it. You can do it with presumptions and never tell people what's really going on, but you can't really do this and expect the people to sit tight. All right. So where was I? Genesis 1:26 through 28. Man is created in God's image, and we're the only ones that are. The animals is a class of created of entities that were not created in God's image. And as per Genesis 9:6, we can kill them, we can eat them. All right, with the exception of some regulations on diet and the rest of that sort of thing. But basically, we can kill and eat the animals. But we can't kill other men, but it's without committing murder, without committing a sin, because we're made in God's image. Created man, Genesis 1:26 through 28. Then get to the Declaration of Independence. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're saying all men are created. These are the same created men that we have coming out of Genesis 1:26 through 28. This is what they started this country on. We're all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, not among animals. They don't have any obligation to secure our God-given unalienable rights as long as we walk in the door and we consent to be treated like animals. And we do consent, and from their perspective, they assume we know what I'm talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you didn't complain. You didn't complain about being treated as an animal, so we did.
And that's where it's right here.
You consented.
Exactly. So we have the next part of that sentence out of the Declaration saying, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Yep.
And I want to even bring up, where is it right here? So you had brought up Article 1, Section 10, and what can the federal government, what can the states not get in the way of? Obligations of contracts, right?
Yep.
So,
States of the Union, though. States of the Union.
Oh, I agree.
We've got a different kind of state here. If your contract isn't in gold and silver, you don't have the State of the Union. The primary reason, it's my suspicion, I can't prove it, but the primary reason they've set up an alternative system of states, and you can find definitions of the states in the federal law, and you will see that they will. I can't give you a place right now, but
go ahead. You're absolutely right.
They will list Texas and Oklahoma and Montana and the rest of that. They'll also list Washington, D.C. and some of the territories like Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Exactly.
You can't say the states of the Union cannot be defined to include Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is not a state of the Union. They are giving us a different kind of state, a state of the United States rather than a state of the Union. And if you're in the state of the United States, you are nothing but livestock. You may have an expectation of rights, but you have no significant rights that they are absolutely bound to respect.
You're absolutely right.
Well, I don't know if I'm absolutely right, but I'm close.
Well, it's very much like you said about the fact that they're including man or other animals, and they're including state and including the District of Columbia. You cannot have. They're not. You can't have one. One and the same. They're not including.
They have to all be the same, or they're not states of the Union. States of the Union do not include territories. Do not include Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason.
And it's an extraordinary word game.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I know. And it's been going on. It's been going on since at least 1906.
Yeah.
And probably, almost certainly, before that.
Well,
that was, I told you about the business where I figured out just from inference. If anybody messed with the money system, they'd get trashed. That's the other one I was just going to say. I have to write this stuff down because I'm getting to the age where I forget things. I remember a few things and then I can't remember.
Let's look at the short history of you had the Pollock decision of
Pollock, yeah.
the right. So they were trying to attempt to get that an indirect tax out of a direct tax situation. So they're attempting to collect taxes on the man's property that he was renting, and he said, no, you can't do that. That's against the Constitution. So between then and 1913, in my gentle opinion, they were formulating a way to get closer to the root of money, where they could
Yeah,
tax the form of money rather than the form of
yeah.
right. Okay, so then
I
then you
doubt that the federal government can lawfully impose taxes, income taxes, on a state of the union. If you're living within a state of the union, I doubt that you have an obligation to pay income taxes unless you've been involved in, maybe they can make it stick if you're involved in interstate commerce, maybe. But if you can establish, no, I'm living within a state of the union, and it's not easily done. For example, are you using a zip code? That's not for a state of the union.
exactly.
All right, that's for one of these alternative states. If you're in an area of venue that has a zip code, yeah, you have to pay income tax. The government's going to argue that, and you better be pretty sharp if you want to keep that argument, if you want to hold them at bay.
I agree.
It gets to the venue you're in. Where am I? Where am I? Am I within the borders of the state of Texas, or am I on the borders of some state of the United States called Texas? Who am I? Am I a man made in God's image, or am I an animal? What kind of money am I using? Am I using currency, or am I using money? They have created a cage made of words, right? And if you want to be free, you better figure out what the words mean, because they don't. I mean, this is no small thing. This is just phenomenal. It's amazing. It's amazing. My background, for what it's worth, I grew up digging ditches. I operated a backhoe and a Caterpillar, drove a dump truck. I've worked underground as a miner, worked in the merchant marine for one trip to India. I don't know. I've been construction worker for 25 years before I ever started publishing my little magazine. And that's when my education really began. And I'm astonished. I am astonished that I attended college for 3 semesters. I might have even passed a couple of classes, but I'm not sure I did that. Right? It's pretty amazing to me that I'm on this program right now.
What year did
This
you
should have
start?
been, what year did I start what?
You said that's what you got you into the law
Oh, I
studies
went
in
through a divorce in 1983. I went through a
1983.
divorce in 1983, and it started me out where I figured I suffered a great injustice, and I thought it would take me anywhere from a year and a half to maybe 5 years to straighten this out. I knew I was an intelligent guy. I didn't have much of an education, but I'm a halfway intelligent man. I understand that. And I figured, all right, it'd take me a year and a half, maybe 3 years, 5 years. I never did get it corrected. But once I started on it, it became just an obsession with me. And one thing leads to another. You go from, I was a roofer I had a nice business as a roofer. I mean, all I did was fix roof leaks. I worked 20 hours a week, and I was averaging 10 grand a month, and that was back in the 1980s. The best month was something like $17,000 working all by myself, 20 hours a week.
Mm.
Yeah, that was good business. I mean, it wasn't anything that would impress, Bill Gates and people and his best friends and the rest of that sort of thing. But it was good work for a blue collar guy, and that was what I was. And yet, good Lord, showed this to me. And it's just astonishing. Where were all the lawyers and the judges and the politicians? Why didn't anybody stand up from 1906 to 2006? Why didn't anybody else find this?
You're right. That's I mean, what you did, what you brought to the table as far as discovering that aspect of the drug definition, man or other animals,
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah, I know. And it's been laying there. It's been there since for a century. When I found it, it's been there for a century. And you
Unbelievable.
look back as how the God's name can people be so stupid, ignorant? And yet they've been it for a century. This isn't something like, they used the man or other animals thing. I found it in 2006, and they'd started up in 2005. And you can sit back and say, "Well, nice try. You guys tried to pull a stunt in 2005, but even a dumb roofer could figure it out in 2006." No, this has been going on for a century when I figured it out. And right now, where are we? 110, 13 years.
It's
Government's been
unbelievable.
treating us like animals.
Well, and it's been 117 years since the Federal Reserve, or
Well, I
107,
mean, it goes
107
right
years.
around in this, and like I say, I think that's the reason for these territorial states,
Well, look at
because
the
they
definition
knew
right
they
here.
could pass paper. They could pass paper dollars in the territories. They could not do it in the states of the Union.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that was the motive on this, and the Federal Reserve was right at the center of it.
Well, and I think that what we're saying from the Pollock case between that point and 1913, we saw that they were able to achieve, as once again going back to Jefferson saying, if they could, if the American people ever allow, through their
Hmm.
consent, these
Yep.
private banks to come in, and they got in there. So when they're able to come in with their private currency, they're able to first, I mean, first they get in there, and then whatever means that they utilize. I believe World War One was pushed on the American people to some degree to issue the bonds necessary to bankrupt the United States 20 years later, when the chart of the Federal Reserve was due for renewal. You had 1933; they couldn't pay back their debts that they racked up from the war, and they had to pay it back in gold. So they had to declare a bankruptcy under FDR. So at that point, now you're separating the gold from the currency, and they could issue unlimited money, which then is
Yeah,
against the people's land, and that's where you get this quote really taking a prophetic, fulfillment,
I
if you will.
understood, but it wasn't news. I mean, people who cared could understand this in the 1700s.
Right.
It's been going on for centuries. I mean, you look in the Bible, I can't give you an example right off the top of my head, but I've looked at it in the past. God warns you, don't lender, don't be, no, I don't remember if he actually said that. Don't be a lender or a borrower. I don't
Right.
know if it's truly quoted from the Bible or not, but there's information. I mean, one of the things that impresses me about the Bible, well, and it's one of the comments that interests me. There is at least one instance, and there may be two, where God is talking about the utensils that are in the big tent in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "The gold and the silver are mine, thus saith the Lord."
Mm.
Well, it was the way it's included in the Bible. It is apparent that he's talking about the utensils in the tent. All right, they've got, I don't know, bowls and dippers, and I don't know what all there is. That's included as part of the paraphernalia to keep the tent right. But God didn't say the gold utensils are mine in this quote. He said the gold and the silver are mine.
Mm.
I think that might be, and I know this is a dopey idea perhaps, but I think the argument that the gold and the silver are mine, thus saith the Lord, I think that might explain why people have lusted for gold and silver throughout history,
Mm.
not just in Christian countries or Jewish countries and the rest of that sort of thing. Gold is big everywhere it goes. And I think maybe the reason the gold is mine, all right? Thus saith the Lord. That means if I've got any gold, I've got something that the Lord likes. This is his gold.
Mm.
I'm obligated to protect it. All right? I don't know where all my obligations, but it makes a difference. Like the Federal Reserve, they're putting out these little paper documents. They're just debt
Mm-hmm.
instruments.
Mm-hmm.
The paper and the ink are mine. Thus saith Meyer Rothschild, or the head of the Federal Reserve. The
Sure.
paper and the ink are mine. But there's a point here. When you use money that doesn't belong to you, belongs to somebody else, there's a question of who gets title to the product.
Right.
If that paper instrument is loaned into circulation, and it is, meaning the Federal Reserve notes. They're loaned into circulation. All right, if I buy something with a Federal Reserve note, who owns legal title to it and who owns equitable title to whatever property I've purchased?
Exactly.
Well, from
Yeah,
my perspective, the legal title goes to the Federal Reserve. They own legal title to whatever you've purchased with that Federal Reserve note. You get equitable title. Yes, you get to drive it around. You get to live in it. If it's a house, you got a bunch. It looks like yours. But they'll tell you, for example, with automobiles, that if you want to get rid of that car, you have to get a special permit to dispose of it. All right? Disposal, the right of disposal is part of the legal title to any property. If you own legal title, you can dispose of it. If you don't own legal title, you can't. So when you decide to sell your drug, you drag your car over your old car or truck over to the junkyard, you're going to need a permission for disposal. I don't remember the right, but there's a form they have, and it's in the Texas code. I haven't looked at it in probably a decade, but you need the right. You need to get permission from the government to dispose of the car. Why? It's not your car. You don't own legal title to your car. You don't own legal title to your house. You own equitable title, yeah. And you should understand what I'm saying. Average person again thinks this guy talking is probably out of his mind, but you should get what I'm talking about after reading about trusts.
yeah.
They've
Look what's on the.
created a trust instrument. You buy the car, you get that title, this manufacturer statement of origin. That's the perfect title to the vehicle. And what do you do with it? You pay the government to take it off your hands. Well, we'll take it, but you got to give us $100. All right,
Yep.
give them $100. Will you take title to the vehicle? Yes, we'll take title to the vehicle. We'll watch out for it. All right. But from then on, they own you, and they own your car at least. They can control how fast you're going, whether your seatbelts are fastened, whether you've got a driver's license or not. Goes back, in my opinion, to whether or not the vehicle is that a state-owned vehicle. If it is, then you have to have a driver's license.
Yeah.
State is entitled to take its property and say, well, you can't drive my car unless you have a driver's license. I'm not just going to let any bozo come in here and drive off in my car. I'm speaking from the state's perspective.
Yep.
And you say, oh, yeah, I've got a driver's license. I've got a driver's license. Okay, you can drive this vehicle. But we still own it. Legal title. And the average person has no concept of what I mean by the concept of legal title versus equitable title, but it goes to trust law.
Yep. Do you see what's on the screen right now?
Yeah, I do.
The Federal Reserve establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When President Wilson signs this bill, the invisible government of the monetary power will be legalized, so on and so forth. That's Charles A. Lindbergh, Sr., 1913. So, if truly that was a trust, we're talking about the exterior limits of this trust being the borders of the United States, if you will. Geographically, anything that the federal government touches with this money power.
Yep.
Anything, right? So it's as you said, everything from now you got this zip code, you got the timeline of the Federal Reserve notes now, Social Security Act, the corporations are now getting EINs. Everyone's now participating in this closed circular private bank system, which, like you said, is a privileged system, of which they're going to attempt to require their driver's licenses, their taxations, their so on and so forth.
Yeah. And you walk right into it if you're using Federal Reserve notes. I knew a man who was a retired professor of economics, mixed reputation. I talked to him for 5 years. I mean, he moved me up. He helped me to understand things that I wasn't even aware of. I was living in a situation where I could not see what was right apparent in front of me, beside me, above me, below me. I couldn't see it. And he made me sensitive to certain ideas. He never told me anything. I mean, he would lecture me kind of. But what was I? Oh, what was I going? Kegley, Richard Kegley. He did more to educate me than anything else I've had in this life. And I've always respected that. Moved me further down the road. What was it? Oh, he went into court He went into court and he brought gold and silver coins with him and set them down on his table where, for the defendant sits. And the judge said, "You got any more of that?" He says, "Bags of it." The judge turned him loose. The point was he was illustrating he didn't have any Federal Reserve notes with him. All right? If the judge can find Federal Reserve notes on you, he's got jurisdiction.
Wow.
That was what happened. Now, this is one story. It's one anecdote. It doesn't prove anything.
Well,
But it's something to consider. If I'm going to court, I'm not bringing any Federal Reserve notes with me. I will bring some gold and silver coins.
on that being said, you shouldn't bring a license or anything else.
Well, that's the same thing. That's just something. That's some of the same thing. See, the problem they've got is this is such a complicated and sophisticated web. Okay, I'm not carrying a driver's license. I got registration for your car.
Right.
You got a title to your car, certificate of title, not a title, a certificate of title, a document that certifies that the title exists someplace. But this isn't it. This is the certificate of title, but it's not the title itself. All right, is that what you got? We got you. When we went into that situation in Austin, Texas, where I discovered the man or other animals thing, the judge was talking, Judge Dietz, John K. Dietz, and I actually liked the man. I like the man. I wish that I could have been friends of his. I wish, because I know that guy could teach me an enormous amount. All right, what I'd spent years trying to understand on my own. Dietz, he knew what was going on. He was a very, very intelligent guy. Well, let's see, where was I going with that story? Every time I start one of my anecdotes, and my introduction burns out my memory.
No, keep going, Dietz.
Yeah, Dietz, where was I? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm 74 years old, and you get to a point where a lot of things that used to be just automatic.
That's right. Hey,
I could rely on my memory. I could rely on, and it'll be back. I'll remember whatever it is I wanted to say about. Oh, I remember. Yeah, I knew it. It'd come around like Haley's Comet. It comes around. Dietz asked Ben Taylor. We were the only two defendants, living defendants, that showed up for the trial. The other living defendants, Mr. and Mrs. William Fresnel, they beat it out of Texas. They took off and they were gone. And their corporation didn't show up. Nobody represented their corporation. Ben represented the corporation. No, he represented the corporation. I represented his trust. But we showed up and we're sitting there at the defendant's table, and the judge looks at Ben Taylor and he says, "Are you the Ben Taylor who is your brother, Tim Taylor, up in I don't remember where, someplace in Texas, some other place in Texas?" And he says, "Yeah, that's me." He says, "Are these? Do you have your account? Your utilities account is at such and such and such and such?" And Ben said, "Yeah." And I don't remember. He had about 3-4 questions for Ben. All right. In retrospect, I didn't know what the hell he was doing. In retrospect, I think he was asking Ben, "Mr. Taylor, are you in our venue?
Right.
Do we own you?"
He was gaining jurisdiction.
Yes, he was gaining jurisdiction. I believe that was happening. And what really at the time confused me and even offended me a little bit, he didn't ask me. He says, "Are you the guy? Are you the Alfred Adask who ran for the Supreme Court back in 1992?" I would have been happy. Yeah, that's me. No, he didn't ask that. He didn't ask anything about where I was living, my utilities, any of the rest of it. He asked no verification. And yet I was a defendant as much as Ben Taylor was in the case. And we were threatened with fines of $25,000 a day. That's $9 million a year. He said nothing to me about, are you this guy Alfred Adask? Said nothing. I think, and I will never be able to prove it, and I wouldn't want anybody to rely on it. All right, but I think what was happening, I was off the grid. I didn't have any driver's license. I didn't have any of the usual paraphernalia. I didn't have any utilities in my name and the rest of that sort of thing. I think the reason he didn't ask me about it is because he knew I was not in the system. I was not on the grid, and he knew he didn't have any jurisdiction. So he just skipped over jurisdiction for me. And a
Wow.
little while later, he came back and he says, I'm going to do something I've virtually never done in court before. And he was a chief administrative judge for Travis County, seat of court, seat of state government. All right.
Mm-hmm.
He was an important man. He says, I'm going to do something I've never done before. Virtually never done is what he said. He hadn't done it very often. He says, I'm going to invite you guys to come back into my chambers, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll see if we can work a settlement. See if we can arrange a settlement between you and the Attorney General. Well, he understood what we were doing. All right. He understood. The Assistant Attorney General that handled the case, I don't know that he ever understood what was going on with man or other animals. I think it was all a mystery to him.
You
But
had already
Judge
brought it in
Dietz,
at that point.
yeah, I'd brought it in. They'd seen my paperwork. I'd sent it in. They'd
Okay.
seen it. And Judge Dietz actually read it. It was one of those things, these patriots, including me, there's no point writing or speaking for just a minute when you can spend 15 minutes trying to develop the idea. We are all verbose, all right? And it was a thick document that I'd submitted. And what you would normally expect is that the judges and whoever wouldn't even bother to read it. These crazy prosays.
Mm-hmm.
Dietz read it and he understood it. And he said, I want you to come back here and we'll see if we can work out a settlement. We said, yeah, sure. I mean, we're faced with $25,000 a day fines, $9 million a year, blah, blah, blah. If somebody wants to settle, it's okay with me.
Right.
But I think the reason, and I don't know this to be true, and I could be completely wrong, but I think the reason is because I wasn't on his grid.
Mm.
He didn't have anything. He didn't have any. I mean, he had a checkoff list. He held it up. We only saw the back of it, but he had a checkoff list for Ben Taylor.
Wow.
Utility bills. He's got driver's license. He got brother lives such and such. Blah 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 blah. I strongly suspect that they didn't. They knew I wouldn't get any checks on that list, and that's why he didn't bother asking me. He didn't want it to go on the record that I didn't have any of these connections
Well,
to the system.
exactly. Benefits, minimum
As long as I
contacts.
didn't object, as long as I didn't expressly object, they could presume jurisdiction, and I didn't have
Right.
brains enough to expressly object. I had done this, but I didn't. It was kind of a mystery to me.
Wow.
Yeah, there were things that I did it, but I didn't exactly know why. And some stuff I didn't figure out for years until years later, and even now I don't know for a fact. Some of the things but it's just they're never going to tell you. All right. If you could put this together and they were obligated to say, all right,
You're right.
you sure are a smart one, Sonny. We're going to have to drop this case because you're right. You don't have any utilities. You don't have a driver's license. You got nothing.
Exactly.
We can't claim jurisdiction over you. So they won't tell you that.
No.
If you do win, it's just a miracle. Right?
Yep. Yep. And there's something to be said about if you just walk into one of those courtrooms already, if you didn't know enough to not get yourself into that position, then there's already a presumption against you to begin with.
Oh yeah. I mean, the cops are making certain presumptions when we start. And I think one of them is they presume you're in an emergency situation. They turn on, talking about traffic cases and the rest of that sort of thing, they turn on those flashing lights and they are known as emergency lights.
Yep.
In the context of emergency, the law is suspended. The only thing that's required, the only thing that has to be in an emergency is survival. That's if someone's shooting at me, it's okay for me to drive 60 miles an hour in reverse through a school zone. If I can make the argument later on when push comes to shove, God, but what the hell do you think you're doing driving 60 miles an hour in reverse in a school zone? Well, it was an emergency. Oh. If it's an emergency, then the laws are suspended. And that's a fundamental idea that applies to, that's going on in Washington. It's going on in Texas. It's going, if they've got an emergency, yes, we've got a constitution, but we don't have one when there's an emergency, so far as I can see. And certainly the emergency overrides any of the statutory rules and regulations. The only thing that you got to do, you got to be able to explain it. You can't just say, "Oh, it was an emergency." What was the emergency? Well, my wife wanted to pick up some diapers for the baby. You know, I told her I'd be home as soon as they closed the bar. That's not an emergency.
Well, and we know that most of the times that the police are pulling people over, it's not an emergency.
But it's under the pretext, I believe, I strongly suspect, can't prove it, but I strongly suspect it's under the pretense that we are operating in an emergency situation, and he's giving you notice of that emergency when he turns on his emergency warning lights.
So you're saying that the overall general situation in the United States and its quote unquote territories, which are the states, you're saying there's a general emergency powers being invoked.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, what do you think the emergency might be?
Bankruptcy.
Kind of. It's got something to do with that. I think the emergency, the original emergency, was where they removed gold from circulation, and later in the 60s removed silver from circulation.
I've heard that they've been in a perpetual
Now
state of
created the
emergency
emergency. We're supposed to have gold and silver coin for the states to operate.
Right.
And they're sitting back and say, "Oh, it's an emergency because the gold and the silver are all gone." Well, who took them? You did, in the federal government. You're the one who made the money disappear. You created the emergency, and then you used the emergency in order to exploit the people.
Thank
That's
you.
my suspicion. I can't tell you that's true.
No, I want to thank you for bringing that up, because that, as we were talking about this idea of consent to the governed earlier, I want to bring up the idea of it's not always within the circumstance of the people to make these easy decisions, because if they cause the crises and then offer the solution by social programs, oh, we're going to crash the economy, and then afterwards we're going to offer out social programs to help the poor people who are struggling. Well, same thing in 1908, the banking panic of 1908. The bankers went off to create the legislation for the Federal Reserve in secrecy because they knew that the people wanted the banks reformed. How are the people would never accept the bankers creating the bank reform?
I understand that. I understand what you're talking about, but the great and terrible insight in all of this is that the people are as dumb as a box of doorknobs. They are unable to understand. I mean, what's their fundamental mistake? Do they trust the government? You're crazy. You trust the government, you are crazy. And you are putting yourself in a circumstance like a Jew getting into a boxcar back in the 1930s, 40s in Germany. Oh, I trust him. He's a German. He's a Nazi officer. We can trust them. Can you really? You know, the Bible says, there is a verse in the Bible where it says, "Put your trust in no man."
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's one of the things that I think might be useful if you wanted to stay out of if they have a venue where you are supposedly ensnared in a trust relationship. So you can't do that to me. I'm a Christian. The Bible says, "Put your trust in no man." I'm not going to trust you. I'm not going to be your beneficiary.
Well, and if you look at the way that Jesus, his walk, although he said, "Give unto Caesar what's due unto Caesar," and you could take that for its own worth as well. He told his disciples to go and to take not even any script with them, no Caesar's money, no Federal Reserve notes. He said a man is worthy of his hire, and the principles adopted, the ideas of sharing amongst each other, taking care of one another. It doesn't allow for other men who are deceiving you through their dainties, if you will, through their benefit programs. It doesn't allow that to come in and to take over the people unless you could divide the people. If the people would have been in a state of true Christianity as a whole, they would have maybe not ran after all the things that the banks were dangling in front of them throughout the years.
I understand that, but there's the problem. They're dangling those. Get your step right up for your free lunch.
I know.
Here's your free lunch. Just got to take some of these certificates with you.
Yep, you're right. And it's a terrible, terrible shame. But
it is a terrible shame. It's a dangerous shame. I mean, I'm looking at this stuff, and it's hard it'd be difficult to persuade me that we're not getting very close to end times.
That's what a lot of people are
And
saying.
there's going to be trouble like no one has ever seen before. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this stuff, and I mean, I can see this, or at least I think I can. I could be completely mistaken and the rest of that, but there's evidence that if you look at it, it's hard to deny some of the implications. You may not want to believe the implications, but it's hard to deny them. And I don't know. It's like all the people, the guy across the street, he's going fishing today. I'm gonna be sitting here working on whatever it is I'm working on, as I've been doing for decades. And people are going out for dinner tonight and the rest of that. It's like they're climbing onto the Titanic, and they're all waving their hats and yay, bonjour, bon voyage, bon voyage. Everybody's climbing on the Titanic.
You're absolutely right.
Hey, wait a second.
Huh.
I don't think this is a good idea. No, pay no attention to the little man down there.
Well, and I think that you have two things going on. You have a worldwide phenomenon, if you will. It's not even a phenomenon, but you have a worldwide situation that this is happening. Central banks and this overlay of a commercial layer where people have jumped into this contractual private commercial layer all across the world. And then you have this idea of America is quote unquote the last standing place of where a government was supposedly created by free people, and those vestiges still currently exist and can be possibly salvaged because it might be. It's, and again,
you might be able to get in front of a jury, and if you're sufficiently articulate and you can make a presentation that's logical and it goes from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and it doesn't confuse anyone, you may be able to do great. All right? But you're going to be counting on that jury. The judge is in it up to his ears. Every judge who's sitting on the bench has probably dealt with a trial that deals with somebody who's doing drugs. That means he's treating people like animals, drugs or food, or, it's hard to get away from this stuff.
Well, and it's not the obligation of the judge to give you information either. So if you're walking in, like you said, dumb as a rock, and you're deep in the
trusting.
You're deep in the jurisdiction of this overlay of this commercial benefit system, whatever you want to call it. You're deep in it, and he's like, man, it's not my job to tell you that you're dumb and you got yourself involved in this, as well as the rest of America. And I guarantee there were judges throughout the history that saw it happening and was like, oh my goodness gracious, they really are getting over on the American public, huh?
I understand, and that's one of the things that's disturbing in all of it. I don't know how many real bad guys are involved in this. I don't think it's 20% of the population. I'm inclined to think it's more like 1 or 2%.
Sure.
All right? I'm inclined to think. But
agree.
There's another 5 or 10% or 20% that are working there right next to them who should see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to condemn. Well, it's like me standing around and telling you, that I'm a good guy. I watched that girl get raped by 17 guys, and I didn't rape her.
Yeah.
So that means I'm a good guy. Well, I didn't call the cops. I didn't get her an ambulance or anything like that. But I didn't actually commit the crime of rape. I just watched. That's not good enough. If you want to be a good guy, you can't just watch. You've got to stand up when you see it. You got to stand up and play the watchman.
Yeah.
Bang on a garbage can lid or something like that. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this.
Yeah. Well, and it becomes difficult as an American when you watch the federal government doing international things on behest of what seems to be corporate commercial banking interest. I'll give one example. Libya, when Muammar Gaddafi was taken out, and it was right after he announced that he was no longer going to trade oil for dollars, but rather for gold dinar. He had 500 tons of gold in his. He was ready to. He said the African continent's been taken advantage of by the Western banking system for too long. We're now going to create our own golden backed dinar. and they took him out within like such a short amount of time.
I
And
understand. You mess with the money system, and they're coming for you.
so it's so hard as an American to, I mean, to say, oh man, that's not fair, that's not fair. And there's issue after issue. Now if I had someone in my household going around the neighborhood, as you said, raping people, then one day the chicken's gonna come home. I mean, what's the
I know.
phrase? I mean, the rooster's gonna come home.
Home to roost. Yep.
Exactly. And so it's like it's just unbelievable situation
I
going
know.
on.
That's exactly right. I mean, I see this, and maybe I'm delusional. That's a possibility on this, but I'm telling you, I see some of the problems that are around here, and I see more, and I don't see a way out. And I'm looking hard, and I'm saying, well, okay, we can still handle this. I don't think we can. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. The fact that I don't think we can doesn't mean anything. That's not, but I don't think there's a way out of this.
Let me ask you this. So give me follow me on a hypothetical. Your father is as a young teenager, he works his newspapers delivery, and then he saves up some money. He builds a business. He never owes any money to the bank. He builds up to a really nice business. And he hands it over to you, his son. And then the bank comes along and says, "Hey, son, your dad created such a nice business. You know what you need? You need credit. And
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead and take this credit line?" And then
Yeah.
through a number of years, they get you to where you're so in debt to the bank that they own your business that your dad
Yep.
built for so long.
Yep.
And can you go back to the court and say, excuse me, or are they going to say, no, you owe the bank, and if you don't pay on it, you have to forfeit the company?
Well, they're going
Now,
to try to take advantage of your ignorance. Could you go back and say, listen, this is wrong, and here's why, A, B, C, D, and E, all right? And I don't consent to any of this stuff, all right? You could do that. And if you can do it correctly, and you get a judge who doesn't want the case to go any further, or you get a jury and you're able to talk to them, you're able to communicate to the jury, you may be able to pull this off. Maybe.
okay,
All
okay,
right.
so
I mean, it's like when we went down there in Austin, in that case, we presented a line of defense, a freedom of religion defense, where they just stopped them right in their tracks. Now, people would say that's impossible, but it wasn't impossible. It actually happened. I know it did because I was there.
yeah,
It's possible, but it's not easy, and you probably need more blessings than you need a lot knowledge. Sit back and say, "Oh, I'm smart. I'm a lawyer." Maybe you're smart, but you better check your blessings before you get in any deeper, and you can't fake it. I don't think you can fake it. I
no,
mean, we were serious. We were amateurs and we were uneducated and a bunch of other things, but we were serious in believing in the good Lord.
yeah,
I think that carried us. I think that helped. All right. I could explain what we're talking about right now to a drug distributor. I don't think he can pull it off. Maybe he can, but I don't think he could make the defense himself. And I think he has to. I don't think it's a defense, this line of conjecture. I don't think it's a defense that you can hire I don't believe you'll ever find a licensed attorney who'll take this defense. It's, oh, that's crazy. You can't do that. They won't. They can't do it.
oh,
I'm
you're
sure
absolutely
he'd
right.
be disbarred if he tried to present this line of argument in the courts. I don't know. Once
No,
again,
I think you're right. Hey, before we close up, I want to show you that from our last video, we had a whole bunch of views and people who were appreciative. But I want to this one viewer, he was called "I'm Not Alone, He's With Me," and so he's sent a bunch of messages. But the last one, I told him that I was going to be talking to you, and I asked him if he had any questions. And he said, I'll just read them all out to you so you could hear. It says, first and foremost, how is he doing? He seems sharp as ever to me. He said, second, would he suggest one or two books that have stood out? And then he asked, is there a site he could point to that stands alone or several of them? And then then he said, please tell him I wish the best for him. He is one of my personal heroes. He also asked in an earlier comment about your site, and he said that he saw that it was taken down or he couldn't
yep.
find it. So you answered that earlier.
Shut my email down too.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And I'm pretty much amazed. I didn't realize how dependent I was on that email. I don't have anybody's email address unless I have access to my email.
Oh my goodness. Who'd
And
you have
it's
emailed?
astonishing how much you rely on that. I had no idea. I was like, I was when they shut that off, and I realized I can't. I don't know.
What service were
100
you
people
using?
that I did. Yahoo,
What email service were you using that shut you down?
Yahoo, Yahoo.
No,
I got my
Yahoo?
blog shut down by WordPress, but email was shut down by Yahoo.
Oh my word.
See,
Well,
they were complaining that I didn't have a telephone, and I'm still not on the grid. I don't have a telephone. Don't have a cell phone. All right.
good for you.
And good for me, but it's one of those things where I'm in the circumstances. I live in poverty. All right, I'm not impoverished, but I live in poverty, and you pretty much have to take that vow of poverty if you want to play this game. I mean,
Well,
I don't have a car, don't have a bicycle, right? Get a car, get a license for it, get a driver's license, whatever. I've kissed my status goodbye, or at
let me
least
ask
that's what I suspect.
let me ask you a question. If the viewers want to send you a donation, is there any way to do that?
Well, do you want to send something in the mail? I'm not.
I don't know
There,
if you
you have to
you
be
want to give
careful.
your address out, or if there's any particular way that people could send you donations.
Uh, I don't. The donations are going to be denominated in Federal Reserve notes.
I know it.
I don't want to touch those if I don't have to. I do. I mean, I have to get at it and the rest of that sort of thing. But it's part of the reason I did the blog. Never charged anything from the blog. Never advertised. Don't want to touch the Federal Reserve notes. Can't avoid them completely. But if Judge Dietz looks at the list of things that make you in their venue, that those Federal Reserve notes and the banking system, I mean, I don't want to touch them if I don't have to. I may have to one day, but I don't have to yet.
What about postal orders? Do you see those
I'd have to
differently?
have a bank account that I could cash them into. I don't have a bank account.
You know,
See, I'm not,
that's
I'm making this point. This is not easy stuff.
hmm,
All right. This is not easy. I'm able to live under circumstances that are, I mean, there are people listening to this program spend more every month on their dog than I spend on me, at least in some months. Um, I'm able to do that because I've lost everything. I've lost my kids, I lost my family, I lost my business. All right, fine. That's what the good Lord wants from me. That's fine with me. But average person can't do that.
right.
They have a list of responsibilities that can't be ignored. I don't. I've been thrown out and put in a circumstance where I'm without the kind of responsibilities that cause you to get a MasterCard or a Visa or a registration for your automobile. Of course, I'm going to register my automobile. You think I'm going to go and get traffic tickets? I'm not going to. Got to be crazy not to have a registered vehicle. Well, yeah, kind of, but
Right.
there's a point to this. I am sincere in, I don't take Social Security.
Hmm.
I'm 74 years old and I don't take Social Security because I believe that's right up in the whole thing, Social Security number, the rest of it. Go ahead and try to live this world without a Social Security number.
Yep.
See if you can do it. I
What
guarantee you're going to have to trust in the good Lord because that's about all.
you,
That's
you
about all
said
you
it.
can.
You said it, brother. Hey, so I don't know if you want to answer any those couple questions. If you had any books that you'd recommend, I honestly think that this conversation right here should hopefully be a good enough book for everyone out there. This has been a wonderful conversation today. Really appreciate it, Al.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I can't think of a single book that you need, but I used to have a complete collection of Black's Law
Mm.
or Black's Law Dictionary. I had from the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and blah, blah, blah. I lost several of my books in a fire up in Oregon. Cleaned me out, but I get along. But this is all about words. I mean, people will tell you that this is about guns and clubs and tasers and I don't know the spray that they give you to knock the people down. We give you a spray of this chemical out of a can and knock you on your butt and the rest of that. That's the government we see, and that's the government that we're impressed by. But it's all about words. And if you can learn the language, and it's not easily done, but if you can learn the language, I know most people say, oh, I know how to speak English. Yeah. You don't know the language until you can speak legalese.
Yeah, it's two different languages.
Yes, exactly. And it requires, it's a discipline. It's like a movie where you find some hidden treasure or a tomb or something like that, or you find a map to the hidden treasure, but it's written in a language that you don't understand. You
Yeah.
must understand the language if you're going to get to the hidden treasure. And if you don't, you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't, my understanding is far from complete, but if I had to guess, and that's only guessing, I'd say I can read at a 22nd grade level. Count your grades. If you're in kindergarten, I guess it's first grade is level 1, second grade level 2, level 3. And by the time you graduate from high school, you're at level 12. Graduate from college, you're in theory at level 16. Nobody is, but I have a hunch, and I could be patting myself on the back, but I think I can read at a 22nd grade level. And it's not fast. You got to sit there and ponder each word, and you've got to, what does this mean? It's like having a virus protection program. But 22nd grade level. The people who write this stuff are writing at about a 25th grade level.
Yep.
Now, I don't have to be as smart as they are, but I do have to be smart enough to read what they produce.
Well, and I'm gonna stop you right there and just say, first of all, I don't think it's so much that they're at a 25th grade level of word. Well, it's not so much that. I think that the usage of contract law in the sense of if you and I create a contract right now, and in our contract definitions, we call red orange. Red equals orange. And then from that point on, anytime we mention the word red, we know it really actually means
That's
orange.
exactly right. But the other dummies who are reading it, well, look, it says watch out for the red lights. And we're saying, no, watch out for the orange lights. They're the ones
Exactly.
that'll really get you.
It's
That's exactly right. But once you do begin to read this, I mean, I read the law for 17 years and it was like chewing through a bale of hay. All right. It was just confusing. And then I understood that they write the law not to illuminate, but to confuse. And once I got that, once I understood, then anytime I'm reading the law, I'm looking, okay, where's the hook? There's a hook in this worm.
Right.
This is a tasty looking worm, but I know we don't find any fresh worms running down this stream. There's a hook in here. And once you know the hook is there, it takes some time and it takes some study. But once you understand that their intention is to deceive rather than to illuminate, all right, then it becomes easier. All right, then it becomes, it's still tedious sometimes, the rest of that, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the learning.
Me too.
And one of the books you were asking for a book.
Yeah.
I don't have a specific book on trusts that I recommend, but I know if I have a friend of mine, a woman who is involved in the legal system deeply. She was sued for 50 grand and in Oregon, and she's fought them off for 5 years. All right, and she's pro se, and in the process, she's learned enough where she is now going to Liberty University Law School over the internet, thinking about going to Harvard, all right, which is really a remarkable story. But one of the things she found out, well, she tells me, I talk to her like we're talking now, and I try to explain things to her about trusts, and she thinks I'm crazy. She's going to school, they're teaching her what she thinks she needs to know, and I'm telling her, look, you don't get it unless you understand trust law. People think, oh, I'm going to go to a court of law. No, you're going to go to a court of equity, whether you know it or not, probably anyway. And you have to master trust law. You have to understand it. It is bizarre. It's almost hard to believe. It is hard to believe. But I can start a trust relationship with anyone without even using a word.
Yep.
Without saying hi, hello, goodbye, anything. All I have to do, I can hand you a pen.
Yep. And
we have started a trust relationship if the judge will agree. On the other hand, if the judge says, nah, that's not a trust relationship, then we haven't. It is a very dangerous form of law. Contracts are easy for me. I don't see a problem with contracts. I'm not afraid to contract because contract has to have all the terms within the four corners of the contract. All right, I read the contract and say, okay, I'll contract with you. I'll go into that agreement with you, or I'll say, no, I can't do it because of this, this, and this. Contracts are relatively easy. Trusts are almost magical. You can start a trust and it's almost like casting a spell. You can put people in positions where you bring them in as a defendant in the case and they're coming in the court of equity and they don't even understand what's going on. They have no concept that they're in a trust. They don't even know what trusts are.
Yep,
they have no. They're being brought in as an implied fiduciary in a particular trust relationship. If the judge will go with it. If he doesn't like your politics, well, he might not. But the whole thing is, I don't know, it's dangerous, it's confusing, but if you can learn trust law, find any book, get anything on, if you can understand 10% of what's going on in trust basics, you become a dangerous man. You can see things happening and you can learn how to avoid them. But if she doesn't believe in trust law, and I've tried to explain it to her, she said, they don't teach her that at the university, so can't be. Well, she's an intelligent woman, but what are you going to do? I'm just telling you that anyone who wants something,
learn trust.
Look for information on trusts. I know you've been paying attention to it, but they are critical. I mean, what is the Constitution of the state of Texas? It's a trust.
It's trust, exactly.
It's an express charitable trust. The Constitution of the United States, a trust.
That is how I all of a sudden, like as you said, the good Lord, I believe, directed me towards that information when I was studying back in 2011. I looked at the Virginia Constitution when I saw that Article 1, Section 2 of the Bill of Rights, and it said the magistrates are the trustees of the people. I said, oh my Lord. I said, humor me for a second. What I was looking for, if you will, Al, was if I was looking at this whole entire situation as some kind of relationship, I said to myself, where in God's name did the people lose their original rights? At what point along this pathway did they lose it? And I was looking.
What answer did you come up with?
Well, it's what we were talking about before, because I looked at it and I saw, well, if this was a trust relationship at day one, and so who were the trustees? The magistrates, the public servants were the trustees. What is it that we were giving into trust, and what were we receiving back? The only thing I could come up with in my head was, if we had the sovereignty devolved upon us as the people naturally because we kicked the king out, then we had to take those absolute rights, those unlimited rights that included killing and whatever. I mean, it's the absolute that a sovereign could have. And if you said, well, shoot, everyone's sovereign, then we have to create some kind of structure. We're going to put our sovereign rights in the hands of the trustees, and we're going to be given back constitutionally protected, constitutionally protected rights that had some form of structure to it. The servants were the trustees of the people's rights, but they weren't in the same absolute fashion that they were prior to that. And
One way or another, as near as I'm able to understand, and I can't give you, another one. It's suspicion rather than absolute truth and the rest of that sort of thing. They have reversed the relationship. They have tricked and enticed us into assuming the role of trustee and abandoning the role of beneficiary. The beneficiaries have all the rights, and the government was supposed to be the trustees.
Yeah.
They have reversed the relationship, or they've set up an alternative trust. Yeah. And that may be what they've done, is they've set up an alternative trust.
The Federal Reserve.
They have an entity called the United States of America. But the proper name for the State of the Union, for the Union, is the United States of America. And it's right there in the Articles of Confederation. You can find it. You can read it. It's in quotes. The style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. That's the proper name. They've set up another one. They have United States. They have United States of America, but not the United States. Not the United States of America.
Yep.
It's an extraordinary word game. It's like Mother May I. And Simon says, and if you don't pay close attention, you're going to be toast. But on the other hand, if you can master the language, you don't need to lock and load. You don't need to get ready to shoot people.
Right.
Can you master the language? And it's not easily done. But you got to put years into it. And it's not going to be done by next Tuesday.
Right.
All right? You got to know what you're writing. You got to know what you're reading. You got to know. You have to really understand this. It really is. You got to study. Right?
Well, and I think people have to, first start with, because as we were talking about before, what do you shout from the rooftop? To me, the first thing that people got to start with is their God-given divine nature, as you said, made in the image of God.
That's exactly right.
People have to start with their self-worth before they could then start to measure where people are taking advantage of them, or where the government is maybe taking advantage of. What is the obvious? It starts to become more obvious when you start to see your own divine worth. When you start to see that, then you start to realize, hey, this doesn't feel right. And you could find places where deceptions happen. You could find these things. But I think you made a good point. Look in trust law. People will find a lot there.
I don't remember what it says exactly in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. But it says this Constitution is made by the people of Texas and for their benefit.
Right.
Well, that's where I realized that they are the beneficiaries, and the Constitution is a trust. And the government is supposed to be the fiduciaries, and they have abandoned that role. They have reversed it where they presume we are the fiduciaries. We're the trustees, and we have the obligations. We're the ones who go to jail. Don't send the beneficiaries to jail. If anybody's going to go do time, it'll be the fiduciaries. All right. They've tricked us, and they've reversed, and to see that this has been done, but even could be done, it's just mind-boggling. And I don't mean in a good way, like, oh, that's just mind-boggling. I mean, this is
awful.
Yes, it's disturbing.
Brother, what would you give as some good words of advice to the younger generations? Any strength to them?
This is all about words. I've said it all throughout this thing. This is all about words. You will be ensnared and perhaps imprisoned in a cell made of words. If you want to get out of this, if you want to protect yourself, you must learn the language. You must become a master of the language. And that'll be something you probably do on your own. Because you can't necessarily trust the people who claim they're able to teach you.
No.
You can't just sit back and say, "Oh, I'll trust him. He's a professor at the university."
No.
Really?
He's either going to be ignorant in his own self because he's within the matrix of learning, or he's going to be protecting the system that doesn't need to be in his mind revealed.
One of the things I've seen over the years is you can talk to people about certain ideas. You can present certain ideas to people. And they know when they hear the idea, whether it's going to lead to trouble or it's going to lead to a free lunch. They don't have to hear the whole idea. They don't have to read the whole book. They know early on. They understand, if I get any deeper in this, I'm going to be forced. I'm going to learn enough where I'm going to be forced to make a choice one of these days, and it's going to be a dangerous choice.
Mm.
You're going to be forced. I know enough where now I can either stand up and risk a great deal, maybe even your life, or
Yeah.
I can just leave. No. I'm going to close my eyes, close my ears. I see nothing. I hear nothing. I don't. People can sense it. Over the years, it seemed that way to me, and it's not a fanciful idea, but it's the way it seems. And if they know that you are leading them off into a place that might be a little bit dangerous, I mean, they don't want to fight with the cops over a traffic ticket. Nobody wants to do that, especially if they haven't done it before. It's a frightening situation. They don't want to go to traffic court.
Yeah.
And really, it's a wonderful opportunity to learn what's going on. You won't learn it the first time you're there, but you begin to learn, wait a second. I think I could handle this. You learn to get rid of your fear.
Yeah.
Well, but they know, and it's a sort of thing where some people just are not going to understand because it's too dangerous for them. I think it's too dangerous. Once you see, it's like being a watchman. And the good Lord tells them, look, it tells Ezekiel, I believe that's where it was in Ezekiel. It says, you're the watchman, you shout the alarm. If you do and they pay attention, they're saved, great. If they don't pay attention, their blood is on their hands. Yeah, but if you don't sound the alarm, it's on you. You have a liability. Once you begin to see this stuff, you can't just go, no. I don't see anything. I don't, you're called.
Yeah.
And
And
better step up if you know what's good for you.
And I want to say one last thing before we close up, just to the people, which is because we've spoken so much about this relationship between the divine, between the law and words and all these things. I want to push to the people. I think that I speak for you as well, in the sense of we might be speaking about this crazy corrupt system, which is just really just disturbing, but when we speak about the Lord and we speak about this joyous thing that's within, and being able to learn and all these things, there is joy in this. There is a love, in life still. Just because this wicked system exists, just because, right? So I know that you and I share a commonality in the sense of encouragement for the people, and wanting not just to spread love. I mean, not just to spread law, but the love that is in this whole thing. It's still a joyous life.
I agree. I think, I mean, I get into the research I've been doing. It wears me out. I don't have the same energy I had 10, 20 years ago. I can't do as much as I used to. But I am finding things that just thrill me. I mean, it's just, oh my God. It's like I'm seeing things that I could not have imagined. And it's a wonderful thing, especially for a man my age. I'm
Yeah.
seeing things that I would have hoped to have seen when I was 30,
Yeah.
40 some years ago. I'd like to have seen them then.
Me
If
too,
I
brother.
had, I might be able to give Bill Gates a run for his money. But as it is, I'm learning things late in life. It's not too late. And I'm not saying anything with the intention. It might sound like I'm trying to discourage people. I'm just warning you that this is a job. It's
Yeah.
an adventure also, but it's a job. And you gotta be ready for this. Requires work, and it'll mean that you'll be reading things
Yeah.
that you can't understand. And you get done reading and you still don't understand it. Then you
Yeah.
read another one and you don't understand. You go through this enough times, you get to a point where, wait a second, I think I'm beginning to understand some of this.
Yeah.
You know?
And I don't want to point out once again that, like, this matrix, this system of
Mhm.
complexities is a bubble that exists to the side of man's divine natural rights,
I agree.
whereas 100 and odd years ago, maybe conspired over thousands, hundreds of years, but over 100 years ago, this system was created as a side chain, as a side bubble of and complexity and confusion of which everyone's been living in. So although you know I'm gonna agree with you 100%. If you want to get into this, people, it's a deep, rabbit hole, and you will find joy in discovering things if you persist at it. But your freedoms exist in a simplicity and this complexity over here in this Babylonian, if you will, and I'm using that in a
Mm.
quote unquote, but in this Babylon system of craziness. That's not where you're at, people. That's not, that's not who you are. That's their system, and we're just, going through it, and like you said, Al, the spiritual principles that exist in deciphering their system and seeing it for what it is wonderful in its own right.
Well, I'll tell you another thing, close out on this with the concept of consent.
Mm.
In the Declaration of Independence, we get that second sentence tells us that we get our unalienable rights from our Creator. Third sentence, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the
Mm.
governed. Right? This whole thing, they're running a system that depends on your and my consent.
Yep.
They don't really have law that can nail us unless we consent to it. Now, saying that doesn't mean that they can't thump you on the head just because the bailiff is feeling a little frisky, split your skull open. But the consent is vital to this system. If you can learn enough language where you can learn how to not consent, I don't consent to that, Judge. I don't consent to this. I don't consent to that. I don't consent to this. The woman I talked to you about before, she thinks I'm crazy because I talk about trusts. She went up for one of her hearings in Oregon. And one of the things she has learned is the value of objections.
Mm.
She read the relevant law on objections in the Oregon Civil Code. And she said, in the objections, and I haven't read the relevant law myself. I can just tell you, here's what she's done. She said the objections can be made at any time once the case begins. Well, that means the way she understood that is they're saying you can object before you ever get to court. You can object out there on the side of the road when the cop is asking you to, see if you can take 10 steps in a straight line. You can object if you know what you're doing, and it counts. It's legal. She's driven these people nuts. I don't know that she's going to win permanently, but they tried to collect 50 grand out of her, and I'll bet it's cost them $150,000 to prosecute the case.
Mm.
This is no way to run a railroad.
You're right.
But this business about I object. It aggravated the hell out of her. I don't know. She might have had 50 or 100 objections in her case. Right? And the judge, so far as I know, the judge has never said you can't do that. They've
Wow.
got them, and they're on the record. And it's something I have. You can start right at the beginning. It'd be a good idea. I should keep into it myself. Look in the Texas code and see what it says about objections. But if it seems to say at any time, and you're prepared to argue, and she can argue.
Well, and if everybody took their case to trial instead of plea bargaining, which is probably 90% of what happens with every case, if everybody took their case to trial, they can never sustain their caseload.
It isn't even everybody. It's 10% probably. If 10% of the people actually went to court rather than accepting the plea bargain or just put your money in the envelope and send it in, the rest of the 90% of them, well, if 10% just said, no, I'm going to court. And you should go to court, especially for things like traffic cases. All right, you may lose, but you are going to learn that you don't have to be afraid. You're going to learn that you can handle this thing.
Yep.
Right? It's a great and wonderful, it's scary, but
and there's a very good chance that you could actually get a lower charge if you go to traffic court and just show up.
I used to deliver pizza when I was going to college back in Illinois, and I was in Chicago. And this goes back into the 60s. And I was delivering pizza for Frank's Pizzerino, and we got stopped and got a ticket. I was speeding, missed a stop sign, going the wrong way on a one-way street in a thunderstorm. I wasn't negligent in the sense I didn't see the stop sign, I didn't see the one-way sign, but here I am
Hmm.
going. So I've got something like 4 tickets, and well, I know from experience you got to go to court on these things. I didn't have a leg to stand on, but you had to go to court. And I go to court. The court is crowded. The judge, yeah, it's my turn, and the judge says, "Mr. Adask," he says, "were you delivering pizza?" One thing, another, like that. "Hey, did you go the wrong way?" "Well, I couldn't see it in the thunderstorm, Judge," and blah blah blah. And I had a little. He said, "Were you delivering pizza?" I said, "Yes, I was." "Who do you deliver for?" I said, "Frank's Pizzerino." He says, "You deliver for Frank's Pizzerino? We order from Frank's Pizzerino."
That's
Case
awesome.
dismissed. Case dismissed.
Wow.
Bang. The pizza must go through.
There you go.
Yeah,
You
there you
know,
go.
so people, you
Sometimes.
got to go.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Al, what a pleasure, brother. We've been on now 3 hours. This is gonna be a
Very
lot for
nice.
people to digest. We might have to break up the videos into a few different parts, but really amazing to talk to you again, brother.
Well, good time. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
And
Keep
yeah,
your
thank you.
strength. Keep your keep your fervor, and we look forward to talking again.
Well, I look forward to doing it again too, Greg. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Mhm.
God bless.
God bless.